Chapter 2100. This kid had always been a tough guy since he was young. He never screamed unless he was pushed to his limits. Could it be that he was seriously injured? The Major General thought of Xia Jinyuan's usual behavior and his expression became particularly grave. Just then, there was a knock on the door. The guards had arrived with the military doctor. "Come in." The Major General, who no longer pursued Xia Jinyuan's words, immediately raised his voice. After the military doctor entered, he pointed at Xia Jinyuan and said anxiously, "Doctor, hurry up and take a look at him." V8, who helped Xia Jinyuan sit down, said softly, "Captain, your courage is as big as your reputation. You managed to make the Major General's mood fluctuate with just a few words. You're amazing. You flatter me." Xia Jinyuan's thin lips curled slightly. While the Major General was instructing the military doctor, he lowered his voice and said, "Brother, I've implicated you just now. Find an excuse to leave. Don't stay here any longer." V8's arm stiffened and his voice trembled. "Brother, is the injury on your waist serious?" "It's a little serious and it's a little inflamed." Xia Jinyuan told his comrade honestly and comforted him with a sympathetic gaze. "That's why I reminded you to find an excuse to leave so that the Major General won't be angry with you. Then I really have to thank you for your reminder." V8 gritted his teeth and helped his comrade sit down. He said to the Major General, "Major General, I have something to deal with here. Can I leave first?" The Major General did not hesitate and waved his hand in agreement. V8 did not stay for a second and strode away. Soon, the military doctor removed the blood-stained gauze. The Major General, who still had some anger in his heart, saw the wound on his waist. At that moment, the last trace of anger in his heart was extinguished instantly along with the bloody wound. It was a very serious wound that went straight through the side of his waist and came out from the back of his waist. Although the wound had been stitched up, there were signs of inflammation around it. It was red and swollen and looked terrifying. The military doctor picked up a small medical flashlight and shone it on the wound. Wearing a mask, he examined the wound and said in a deep voice, "The wound shows signs of inflammation. We can't rule out the possibility of pus forming inside. To be conservative, we should remove the stitches again." The military doctor gently pressed his hand around the wound with a pair of sterile gloves. After taking a closer look, he raised his head and asked Xia Jinyuan in surprise, "Did you sew it yourself?" Although the stitching technique was appropriate, the stitching was sloppy, and there were signs of pulling at the top and bottom of the stitching. At a glance, it was obvious that the stitching was done by oneself. Moreover, the stitching speed was very fast, and the stitching was not done properly. Xia Jinyuan nodded faintly and said, "Help me disinfect the surrounding area first. We'll talk about removing the stitches later. Do you want to be taken to the hospital by the guards?" The Major General glanced at him coldly and asked the military doctor how serious the infection was. Compared to the military doctor's shock, the Major General was much calmer. During battle, if the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade were injured, they would treat their own wounds if they had no comrades by their side. What he was concerned about was whether the infection was serious. "From the outside, I can't tell how serious it is for the time being. However, gunshot wounds are different from other injuries, especially penetrating wounds. Sometimes, the situation looks good on the outside, but the inside may have formed pus." The military doctor was somewhat impressed by the soldier in front of him who dared to sew his own wound. He took off his gloves and answered the Major General's question with a serious expression. "I suggest that you go to the hospital to see if there is any inflammation inside." Xia Jinyuan knew that he could not escape going to the hospital tonight. He asked the military doctor to disinfect the wound first and said to the Major General, "There's no need to trouble the guards. I'll take the initiative to go to the hospital after reporting to you." Chapter 2101. Major General realized that the problem did not end with the arrest of the illegal Chinese businessman. He looked at Xia Jinyuan, who was in charge again, and asked the military doctor, "Can his injury be treated in a few hours?" "There are no signs of fever. It can be treated in a few hours." The military doctor packed up the medical supplies, saluted and left. It was already 8:30 at night. The office building of the military headquarters was brightly lit. The security outside was tight. Inside, uniformed soldiers were working on their work quietly. The Deputy Chief of Staff Du came out of the General Staff Department building and took a car to Wang Fu Restaurant. He was tired after an entire day of meetings, so he sat in the back and closed his eyes to rest. Director Yi of the Southern Province took his daughter to report to the Beijing political group. In the end, his wife insisted that he go over and talk to Director Yi. He had already said what he needed to say and helped with what he needed to do. What else did he need to see? The Deputy Chief of Staff Du did not want to go. When the waiter opened the door of the private room, his face was full of smiles. He strode over and said with a smile, Sorry, the General Staff Department called for an emergency meeting. Director Yi has to wait for so long." Yi Jifan didn't dare to accept this sentence. He had been paying attention to the movement at the door. When he saw the corner of a military green coat, he was very perceptive and stood up to greet the Deputy Chief of Staff Du before he walked over. "I'm sorry to disturb you. Please forgive me." He did not forget to remind Ying to get up quickly. Mrs. Li liked the father and daughter's eyesight. People should have good eyesight. Otherwise, they would appear clumsy. Okay, you two don't need to chat. Old Du, let the waiter serve the dishes. Director Yi saw that you did not come and insisted on waiting. I couldn't persuade him, so I had to serve some desserts for Ying to eat. Mrs. Li, who was wearing a gold velvet cheongsam with a rich peony flower embroidered on the collar, smiled and invited the two to sit. She personally poured a cup of tea for her husband and said elegantly, "The two children have not arrived yet. The new year has just ended. I really don't know what they are busy with. I want to find someone to eat with, but there is no one to accompany me. Ying is the best. She is obedient and sensible. She knows that I want to talk and chat. See, before you came, it was this child who kept me company to relieve my boredom." Hearing this, the Deputy Chief of Staff Du laughed even louder. He looked at the young lady beside his wife and nodded approvingly. She is indeed obedient. Director Yi has taught her well. If it was Jai, TSK, at most, 10 minutes. Yi Ying, who was flattered in her heart, tried hard to suppress the corners of her mouth that wanted to curl up. She lowered her head shyly as if she couldn't bear the compliment. Her voice was a little soft, but she didn't sound petty as she replied, "You're flattering me. Madam is knowledgeable. It's my fortune to be able to talk to Madam. Hey, why are you so cute? I am still outside, but I can still hear you through such a thick door." The one who spoke was Du Jai. Dressed in a military uniform, she walked in with an arrogance that Ying envied. It was the kind of arrogance that could only be possessed by someone who was confident. Chapter 2102. Before meeting Du Jai, Yi Ying was already envious of Mrs. Li. Now that she saw Du Jai in person, there was not only envy in her heart, but also jealousy that she couldn't suppress. If she grew up in the Du family, she definitely wouldn't be worse than Du Jai. Definitely not worse. She remembered that there was a sentence written in a book, "Birth determines everything." In the past, she didn't really believe it, but after seeing Du Jai, she really believed it. Birth does determine everything. In terms of appearance, she definitely wasn't worse than Du Jai. However, she didn't have Du Jiayi's arrogance between her eyebrows. In terms of temperament, she and Du Jiayi each had their own merits. One was arrogant, while the other was gentle. However, she didn't have the confidence of Du Jiayi. She also didn't have the elegance of Du Jiayi even when she was just carrying water. This kind of Du Jiayi made Ying deeply jealous as soon as she appeared, but she didn't dare to show it at all, for fear that Mrs. Li beside her would notice it. Since Du Jiayi came in, Mrs. Li couldn't care less about Ying, who was trying to make her happy just now. She revealed a deep and loving smile and directly joked, "I can't finish talking bad about you even if I talk bad about you for 3 days and 3 nights. I dare to say it in front of you, but I dare to say it behind your back even more. Your mother is right. You are the most disobedient. If your mother and I don't talk bad about you, who else would we talk bad about?" Compared to his eldest daughter, the deputy chief of staff doted on his naughty but considerate youngest daughter more. After joking, he introduced her to Yi Jifan. "Chief Yi, this is my daughter, Jiayi, who always gives me a headache. Jiayi, come and say hello to Uncle Yi." He pretended to criticize, "Look at you, you don't even know how to be polite. You don't even know how to say hello when you come in." When Du Jiayi came in, it was her home ground. She took off her military cap and put it on the table. She smiled and said, "You didn't introduce him. How would I know who he is?" She stretched out her hand and took the initiative to shake Yi Jifan's hand. "Hello, Uncle Yi. I'm Du Jiayi. The bad things my parents said just now were all lies. Please don't believe them." She was generous, decent, and experienced in dealing with people. Yi Jifan could tell at a glance that Ying was not as good as her. He had been an official in the southern province for a long time, but he had never met a superior who had a daughter of the same age as his daughter. Even if there was one, it would be the daughter of a subordinate who was inferior to him. In comparison, he felt that his daughter's temperament was outstanding. Now, compared with the daughter of the deputy chief of staff Yi Jifan could not help but sigh with emotion. He said to Mrs. Li and the deputy chief of staff "When I see Miss Du, I really understand the meaning of the saying, dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the son of a mouse can dig holes." In one sentence, the 3 members of the Du family were praised. Du Jiayi said in her heart, "It's a bit interesting." Then she took the initiative to talk to Ying when Mrs. Li introduced her. "She's really well behaved. I don't dare to speak loudly. Besides, she's even more beautiful than my mother said." Ying was a little flattered. She quickly got up a little and said in an anxious tone with a little admiration, "Miss Du is more beautiful and very handsome. You're quite honest." "Yes, although you're very beautiful, you're indeed a little worse than me," Du Jiayi purposely said with a smile. The pair of eyes that looked at Ying were as bright as diamonds, shining brightly. Her eyes were obviously sizing her up. She was very presumptuous and calm. Ying was a little nervous because of her words. Now she was sizing her up, which made her even more nervous. Moreover, as a girl, her intuition told her that although Du Jiayi was smiling at her, there was unfriendliness in her eyes that made her tremble. She didn't like her. Chapter 2103. This discovery made Ying's palms break out in layers of cold sweat. She did not even notice that the phone in her bag had been vibrating non-stop. Ying's intuition is correct. Du Jiayi really doesn't like Ying. Obedient, well-behaved, honest, and beautiful. Yet another one who wants to establish a relationship with the Du family. If it wasn't for her father saving Big Brother's life, I really wouldn't have come over to entertain this father and daughter pair who came from God knows where. Mrs. Li doesn't show up, letting her daughter look at Ying wantonly. She wants to find herself an obedient daughter-in-law. If her future sister-in-law can't stand it and gives her a hard time, she won't want such a daughter-in-law. The little wife Mrs. Li chose for you this time is really good-looking. You can come up. Du Jiayi doesn't care about Yi Ying's feelings. She sends a letter to her brother Li Yuan, who is 1 year younger than her downstairs. Under Mrs. Li's knowing eyes, she starts to chat with Yi Ying enthusiastically. Li Yuan takes Mrs. Li's surname. After he was born, Mrs. Li made the decision directly. The Du family didn't say anything and let Mrs. Li make all the decisions. When Li Yuan comes up, the real master is here. Li Yuan, who has just turned 23, is tall and handsome. He has been studying abroad for many years and has an unruly arrogance. But Mrs. Li has taught him well. He is tall and straight, with the noble air of an aristocratic family. When Mrs. Li sees her youngest son, she talks more than before, especially the sentence, "My son has never had a girlfriend." "Director Yi, how about we be in-laws? What do you think?" Li Yuan's half-joking words made Yi Ying's heart beat like a little deer. When Li Yuan smiled and said, "Miss Yi is very suitable for the image of a girlfriend in my heart," Yi Ying's cheeks were so red that Li Yuan could not help but cast sidelong glances at her. Yi Jifan knew that Madame Li would not speak without thinking. She only said this because she really meant it. For a moment, even someone as calm as him was a little excited. The father and daughter are so excited that they don't care about the vibrating mobile phones in their bags. After 3 rounds of drinking and talking happily, the vibrating mobile phones in their bags are directly turned off by Sun Dongqing. Sun Dongqing heard that both phones had been turned off. She sat weakly on the sofa like a frosted eggplant. It's over, it's over. The days that I finally had hope for are over again. Her disappointing daughter, this time she was really going to be angered to death. He had sent her abroad to study because he wanted her to study hard and start from scratch. But what about her? But as for her, Ioyo, she was so angry, so angry. But she actually hung out with those blonde guys from overseas, and even allowed them to put their hands into her clothes and grope her all over. She even curled up on the sofa with the 2 men and kissed them here and there. She was infuriated. She didn't look like a student at all. She was just a slut. Sun Dongqing, who was shocked by the contents of the videotape, was really angry. Although she always defended Yi Ying, she was a woman who came from the countryside. What she hated the most was debauchery. The things that she couldn't bear to see the most, her daughter had done them all. Everything was done. God damn it. The whole family was disgraced. Sun Dongqing, who couldn't get through to her husband, burst into tears. It was too embarrassing. Too embarrassing. After such a shameful thing happened, she wanted to take a rope and strangle herself to avoid being criticized behind her back. Sun Dongqing called the phone again and again, but it was always turned off. She was so angry that she screamed and jumped. Suddenly, she rushed back to her room and rummaged. She wanted to go to the capital. Chapter 2104. Sun Dongqing didn't think about anything else. She just wanted to bring her daughter back from Jing City as soon as possible. It was okay if her daughter was humiliated at home, but she couldn't let her daughter embarrass herself outside. That was all she could think of. The most important thing now was to bring Yi Ying back from Jing City. She didn't think that Yi Ying was about to enlist in the military, nor did she think that the videotape might have been sent to more people. Sun Dongqing found her ID card. She only brought her wallet and mobile phone. She didn't bring any other luggage. She locked the door and went to the airport. She didn't dare to ask the driver to send her home. She was afraid that the driver would notice something wrong from her face. She even covered her face with a thick checkered scarf to take a taxi. On the way to the airport, she was so anxious that she kept calling her father and daughter, hoping that one of them would turn on his phone. Yi Jifan, who was chatting happily with Deputy Director Du, didn't even look at his phone until they returned to the hotel room. Yi Ying was even more so. Facing the handsome and rich Li Yuan, who had a good family background, her heart was pounding like a deer the whole night. She didn't care about anything else. She was not attracted to Li Yuan, but to the Du family's family background and wealth. She didn't expect that her mother's words would come true. She would really find a husband who could be a general in the future. No, Li Yuan said that he didn't want to join the army. She didn't want to find a general as her husband, but a general as her father-in-law. And a mother-in-law from a famous family. It didn't matter whether Li Yuan was handsome or ugly. Of course, she would feel more comfortable if he was handsome. Although Yi Ying was excited the whole night, she didn't become impetuous because she was always calm in front of others. It was as if Mrs. Li was just joking. After a short moment of shyness, she returned to normal. Mrs. Li was more and more satisfied. Before leaving, she held Yi Ying's hand and said with a smile, "Tomorrow is Jiai's birthday. There will be a birthday party at home. Remember to come with your father." Not only did she need to be obedient, but she also needed to see how good her social skills were. She then turned to Yi Jifan and said, "Director Yi, remember to come tomorrow. Don't forget about it." Yi Jifan was stunned for a few seconds by the sudden good news. When he finally recovered, he slapped his forehead and said apologetically, "I didn't think that tomorrow would be Miss Du's birthday. I didn't make any preparations at all. It would be rude of me to go over there." How could Yi Jifan forget about this kind of good thing that could help his daughter integrate into the upper-class circle as soon as possible? He still had to put in 120% of his effort, but he still had to say some polite words. How could Yi Ying compare to Du Jiai when it comes to speaking? Du Jiai, who secretly curled her lips in disdain, smiled like a flower in the blink of an eye. "Do I still lack a gift from you? It's fine as long as you're here. I'll introduce a few friends of your age so that you can play with them during your holidays." How could Yi Ying not notice the hidden meaning in Du Jiai's words? She was disdaining her for not having enough status to give her a present. She hadn't done anything to anger her, but she had been saying such harsh words the entire night. Yet, on the surface, it sounded like she was being magnanimous and polite. Isn't she just afraid that I'll steal Madame Li's attention? Chapter 2105. A lady from a prestigious family. Bah! She's so narrow-minded. If it weren't for her surname, I wouldn't have bothered with her. Yi Ying, whose heart was in turmoil, continued to pretend that she didn't understand Du Jiai's sarcasm. Maintaining a sweet smile, she said calmly, No need. I'm already very satisfied to be able to attend Jiai's birthday party. There's really no need to trouble Jiai to introduce more friends. I'll take my time." Mrs. Li had been paying attention to their conversation the whole time. Seeing that Yi Ying was polite and a little domineering in her daughter's reply, she nodded with satisfaction in her heart. Not bad, she didn't swallow her anger. When pushed too hard, she knew how to fight back gently. It could be seen that she had a soft but firm character. She wouldn't be too weak and let others bully her. She had observed enough for tonight and was satisfied with the result. Jiai, you take advantage of Ying Ying's gentle temperament to be aggressive. Mom saw it all tonight. You're the most dishonest. Mrs. Li, who had let Yi Ying pass another hurdle, finally spoke and stopped her daughter from continuing to suppress Yi Ying. As soon as she spoke, Du Jiai seemed to have changed into a different person. She held Yi Ying's arm affectionately and said with relief, "Oh, I'm so tired tonight. Mom, don't call me for this kind of thing in the future. I didn't know how tiring it is to be a bad person until today." Oh, I'm so tired. I don't want to be a bad person for the rest of my life. Ying was stunned. She didn't understand what was going on in front of her. I'm sorry, Ying. It was my mom's idea tonight. It really had nothing to do with me. Dujie playfully blinked her eyes and explained, when my mom told me about it, I was really in a difficult position. When I saw you again, I almost wanted to throw away my responsibilities and leave. But I couldn't help it. It's my mom. As long as my mom says something at home, it's like an imperial edict. Even my dad doesn't dare to disobey. As her daughter, I don't dare to do anything. The more she spoke, the softer her voice became. In the end, she whispered into Yi Ying's ear, giggling as she continued, let me tell you a secret. My mother is quite satisfied with you. As for you, you only need to coax my mother in the future. As long as my mother is happy, the whole family is happy. Yi Ying, who understood what was going on, actually wanted to avoid it. Her body had even stiffened from the contact with Du Jie. She did not feel any warmth from the hand that was holding her arm. Instead, she felt her heart tighten. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. Go to bed early tonight and come over early tomorrow to help me receive the guests. Du Jie had always been strong-willed. Regardless of whether Yi Ying was willing to come over early or not, she made the decision directly. To her, letting the daughter of a small bureau chief come over to help her in advance was already giving the other party a lot of face. She could only rush over, how could she refuse? Madame Li, who was already strong, did not think that her daughter was strong. Instead, she thought that her daughter's arrangement was good. She smiled and said to Yi Ying, okay, I'll send a driver to pick you up early tomorrow. You don't have to prepare a gift. Your sister Jie doesn't lack anything. You don't have to worry about your outfit. Just use the same makeup artist as Jie. You'll definitely look more beautiful and elegant. She'll send a driver to pick me up tomorrow. Yi Ying, who was initially displeased by Du Jie's words, was delighted. That's right, Madame Li was the one in charge of the Du family. As long as she could make Madame Li happy and marry into the Li family, would she still need to be afraid of Du Jie? Chapter 2106. She was just a married daughter. How could she compare to Li Yuan? Li Yuan even followed Madame Li's surname. It was clear how high his position was in Madame Li's heart. Yi Ying quickly glanced at the handsome figure who was on the phone in front of her. The smile on her face became even more gentle. Du Jie's eyes flashed with a hint of contempt as she quietly observed her mother's expression and actions. Maintaining the smile on her face, she continued to hold Yi Ying's arm tightly as she pouted and acted coquettishly. Mom, you're so biased. None of my friends have ever received a single word of praise from you. Me too, it's been a long time since you've praised me. Did she really think that she could marry into the Du family just by coaxing her mother? She sure knew how to daydream. For some reason, Du Jie disliked Yi Ying. She had been prejudiced against her since the beginning. Madame Li glared at her daughter who was beginning to misbehave again. Although she said she was glaring, her eyes were filled with affection. If you were half as good as Ying, I would dote on you every day. Even the deputy chief of staff Duke joined in. He laughed and said, your mom is right. If you were half as obedient as Ying, I would dote on you too. Polite words were enough to be taken seriously. Yi Jifan quickly flattered back. The atmosphere was so pleasant that everyone's faces were filled with smiles. Du Jie looked at Yi Ying, who was getting more and more uncomfortable, and sighed. Ying, your arrival has caused my status to plummet. I don't care anymore. I'll leave the important task of making my mom happy to you in the future. The intimate and witty words made the three adults laugh even louder and louder. Yi Ying had no idea what Du Jie was thinking. Her whole body was bearing the weight of Du Jia's body. She tried her best to smile naturally and said gently, "Jia, you're making me happy. It's my fortune to be able to make Madame Li happy." Du Jia was sometimes cold and sometimes hot. The things she said, the things she did, and the expressions she showed were all different. Her words were obviously sarcastic, but it just made the adults laugh loudly. Ying couldn't help but feel afraid of such a Du Jia. She couldn't help but feel more envious and jealous. In the face of power, Yi Ying was not as arrogant as she was when facing Yi Qian. Even if Du Jia was rude to her, she was willing to endure it. After the Du family of four got into the car and left, Yi Ying gritted her teeth as she stared at the back of the car. Her fingers were tightly gripping the corner of her shirt as she silently vented her anger. Yi Jifan, who had appeared out of nowhere, looked at his daughter's fingers, which were fiddling with her clothes. His eyes were dark as he said, "This is Du Jia's confidence. She dares to do this because she has the ability to look down on you. The reason why you don't dare to talk back is because she has enough reason to look down on your identity." Yi Ying, what does it mean to be above others? A person above others dares to say what they want to say and do what they want to do. Even if others feel uncomfortable, they can only accept it. Yi Ying, whose eyes were red, bit her lower lip tightly. She looked up at her father and reluctantly put down her pride. She gritted her teeth and said, "I know. That's why I can only endure it for now. I can only endure it until I can marry into the Li family." Madame Li was just joking. "Did you take it seriously?" Yi Jifan's cold voice interrupted Yi Ying's beautiful dream. "What kind of family is the Du family? Are they afraid that they won't be able to find a daughter from a prestigious family to be their daughter-in-law?" Yi Ying, stop dreaming. You should think more about how to make use of Madame Li's love to fight for a place in the military. See if it's possible to transfer to a military academy and become an officer with a military rank. Chapter 2107. Yi Ying's beautiful dream had just begun, and before she could get to the right place, Yi Jifan poured a bucket of cold water on her. Yi Ying almost shed tears. Although she thought it was possible, she did not dare to say it out loud. She could only think about it in her heart. Go back to your room and have a rest. Get up early tomorrow and wait for the driver sent by Mrs. Li. It's good to go to the Li family early. I think Mrs. Li will introduce you to the wife of the governor who is close to her. As long as you can rely on the Du family, Yi Ying, your marriage will not be too bad. Yi Jifan did not dare to think about his daughter marrying into the Du family. He only wanted to get Mrs. Li's help. Thinking that Mrs. Li will send a driver to take her to the Du family tomorrow, Yi Ying felt a little better. Yi Ying went back to her room and took a bubble bath. It was not until she went to bed that she found that her phone was out of battery. She plugged it in but did not turn it on. She went to bed directly. Yi Jifan was afraid that something would happen in the bureau, so he charged his phone and turned it on. As soon as he turned it on, countless text messages beeped. It was either the home phone or Sun Dongqing's phone. There were nearly 30 text messages in total. Yi Jifan, who seldom received continuous calls, calmly called home. No one answered the home phone, and the phone was turned off. He did not have much patience with his wife, so he ignored it and went to sleep. At this time, Sun Dongqing was sitting in the luxury cabin flying directly to the capital. Other passengers had fallen asleep, but she was not sleepy. She was looking forward to getting off the plane as soon as possible with her eyes wide open. In the car, Mrs. Li was asking Li Yuan about his impression of Yi Ying. Li Yuan did not think much about it, nor was he interested. He just said to please Mrs. Li, "She is not bad. At least she is pleasing to the eye. She is not like the women I have seen before who think they are so great. She seems to have a good personality." She doesn't look like someone who will make trouble. Mom, it is useless to ask Li Yuan. As long as a woman is beautiful, he will like her. Du Jiayi smiled coldly and did not hide her disdain for Ying. She is not bad-looking, but I don't see anything good about her personality. A dog that bites will not bark. People like her are like this. She's not causing trouble because she doesn't dare to cause trouble at my house. She doesn't have the guts. Madame Li had long seen that her daughter was against Ying. Although she didn't say anything, it didn't mean that she didn't know. Hearing her daughter's words, she smiled and looked at her daughter, who had always had sharp eyes. She praised, "Your eyes are indeed more accurate than Li Yuan's. Ying doesn't make trouble, but it doesn't mean that she is really weak. Her character is quite gentle. I admire her forbearance. She's also a sweet talker, just like her father. She doesn't give people the impression that she's trying to flatter them. I just feel that she's a little smart. Considering her age, she's quite tactful in dealing with things. She's much better than the girls your brother has dated before." The deputy chief of staff Du, who was sitting at the front, turned his head and said to his son and daughter, "Your mother is very satisfied with her. You two can just go along with what she says. Your opinions don't count. Dad, you've always been on Mom's side. Turn around and look straight ahead. Don't speak, don't interrupt." Du Jiayi leaned over and raised her hand to cover half of the deputy chief of staff Du's face. She pushed him back and said, "We'll talk about our own things. Just listen to us." Okay. I won't say anything. I won't say anything. You two continue to talk." The deputy chief of staff Du, whose face was pushed back by his daughter, laughed. He never cared about the things at home. It was enough for him to have his wife. If she said it was good, it was good. If she said it was bad, it was bad. Chapter 2108. Mrs. Li patted her daughter's arm with a smile. "You're so rude. Sit up straight. Don't affect the guards driving." "I haven't finished yet." Du Jiayi sat back with a smile and continued to say what she disliked about Ying. "I don't like her very much. It feels like she's pretending. She blushes all night and she's so shy. It's as if I'm so thick-skinned. I don't like her. And, Mom, didn't you notice that her eyes were a little flirtatious?" When Li Yuan came in, she quickly glanced at him and lowered her head. "I really thought she was shy at that time. But in the end, you said you wanted her to be Li Yuan's girlfriend." "Ha." Du Jiayi snorted softly with a mocking look on her face. She started to stare at Li Yuan from time to time. She's not looking at him shyly. She's just sizing him up. Does she want to see if Li Yuan is good enough for her? She's just the daughter of a little director. What right does she have to think that Li Yuan is good enough for her? Du Jiayi's words had a great impact on Mrs. Li. After a long time, she nodded and said, "You're all young people. Looking at young people with the eyes of young people, sometimes you can see more clearly than adults. Hearing what you said, it's possible that Ying deliberately behaved well in order to leave a good impression in front of me. But..." Although Mrs. Li agreed with her daughter's words, she did not directly deny her love for Ying. But she's really gentle and filial. You can see it from her pouring tea for Yi Jifan from time to time. She turned to ask Li Yuan, who was not interested, "What about you? What do you think?" Her daughter's thoughts were important, but it also depended on her son. "As long as she's good enough for you and my sister, I have no objections." Li Yuan shrugged indifferently. Yi Ying's beautiful face flashed in his mind, and his eyes were a little more interested. Her father is not bad. Southern Province is a rich province. I want to go there to develop my career. If I have Yi Jifan's guidance, it should be smooth. Du Jiayi rolled her eyes at Li Yuan. Do you need Yi Jifan's guidance to develop your career in Southern Province? Isn't it enough for you to have uncle's guidance? Eldest uncle, second uncle, and third uncle can also help. Do we still need Yi Jifan? Sister, you're dreaming. Uncle will only help Li Jinmian. Why would he help my mother? It was already good enough that he didn't go against his mother. Third uncle doesn't want to count on him either. He's been hiding abroad for so many years. What can he do to help me? At the mention of his grandfather's family, a layer of darkness appeared in Li Yuan's eyes. With eldest uncle and second uncle around, what can we do? If you don't even try to fight for it, how do you know you can't do anything? Third uncle was forced to retire from the army and go abroad by first uncle. Now you can join forces with third uncle, right? There's also first aunt. She's his second wife, and she can't wait to get rid of Li Jinmian. Don't you know that you should join forces with first aunt? Hearing this, Li Yuan glanced coldly at Du Jiayi, who had simplified the matter. No matter how much eldest aunt wants to get rid of Li Jinmian, she won't help me, who also wants to divide the Li family. What are you arguing about? All of you, shut up. Madame Li glanced at her son and daughter angrily. The smile in her eyes was replaced by dark clouds. Your second uncle will be here tomorrow. Don't talk about his past. Also, spend more time with your grandmother. She loves you too the most. Chapter 2109. Du Jiayi doesn't dare to make trouble when Mrs. Li is angry. She secretly glares at Li Yuan, who caused her to be criticized, and feels depressed. Thinking of her grandfather's family, Du Jiayi purses her lips and holds Mrs. Li's arm gently. She says softly, "Mom, don't be angry. My brother and I know what to do. We won't embarrass you and third uncle in front of eldest uncle and second uncle." Why was it said that daughters were considerate? In fact, it meant that daughters were attentive. Her daughter immediately comforted her when she saw that she was angry, but her son didn't. Men were not so attentive and cared about personal gains and losses. Mrs. Li sighs and pats her daughter's shoulder gently. I'm relieved that you are sensible. Don't tell your brother that he needs to rely on his uncles in the future. They are unreliable. Your eldest uncle and your grandmother are like fire and water. It's good that your second uncle doesn't care. Your grandmother doesn't have to worry about it. Your third uncle has just come back. How can he help your brother? What's more, there is Li Jinmian. He alone is enough for your grandmother and your third uncle to worry about. Let's solve our own problems. Don't bother your grandmother. Mrs. Li is not in a good mood when it comes to her family. Du Jiayi sees that she frowns and doesn't want to talk about it. She nods obediently and lowers her eyes to hide the complicated feelings in them. Her grandfather's family seems to be rich for generations, but their relationship is not ordinary. Her grandfather was a playboy all his life. He married her eldest grandmother and gave birth to her eldest uncle and second uncle. In the end, he raised her younger grandmother and gave birth to her third uncle and mother. What surprised her more was that her younger grandmother and her eldest grandmother were not blood-related sisters. Her younger grandmother was adopted by her eldest grandmother's family. Later, the affair between her grandfather and her sister-in-law was exposed. Her eldest grandmother, who was strong-willed, slapped her younger grandmother in the face and the two sisters turned against each other. It was not until her eldest grandmother passed away due to illness that her younger grandmother was able to marry into the Li family and become her grandfather's legal wife. The two elders fought for her grandfather for a lifetime and let the resentment of the older generation continue to the next generation. Du Jiayi thinks that her grandfather's family is obviously prominent, but the resentment of the older generation affects her generation. She can't help but sigh heavily. It is very quiet in the car, so her heavy sigh is particularly obvious. Madame Lee, who was already in a bad mood, felt a little amused when she heard this. Why are you sighing all of a sudden? Is there anything in the family that you need to worry about? Mom, I am thinking about my grandmother. Adjusting her sitting posture, Du Jiayi asked softly, Mom, tell me what happened to grandfather's family back then. Why did eldest aunt pass away in an accident, and why was third uncle forced to retire from the army and leave for a foreign country? Tell me, I really want to know. Lee's mother's mother. Lee, F. Aunt's mother's. Hearing this, Madame Lee's face turned cold again, and she said in a low voice, Don't ask about things you shouldn't know. Why? Deputy Chief of Staff Du interrupted Du Jiayi and said with a smile, Jay, that's all in the past. Why are you, a young person, bringing up the past? He is still as secretive as before. His face changes as soon as he mentions it. Du Jiayi reluctantly says, Oh. She thought about it and said, Didn't Li Jinyan say that he is back? Mom, do you think he will come to our house tomorrow? Chapter 21:10. That depends on your first aunt's mood and his own mood. Madame Lee's attitude was quite cold when it came to Li Jinyan. It's better if neither of them comes. She had no feelings for her eldest brother, not to mention that he was at odds with old Madame Lee. Li Yuan, who was resting with his eyes closed, said with a faint smile, Li Jinyan won't come, but cousin will definitely come. Because as long as it's something Li Jinyan hates, the two of them will like it. That's right. Li Jinyan will definitely not come. Du Jiayi nodded thoughtfully. His eldest uncle's family wasn't complicated. The main reason was that his eldest aunt didn't like Li Jinyan, who was born from his first wife. She wholeheartedly wanted to fight for the family inheritance for her son and daughter. It was not that Li Jinyan was not sensible, but that first aunt could not tolerate the son left by the first wife. From time to time, he would make some trouble. As a result, the relationship between Li Jinyan and first uncle was quite bad. Fortunately, Li Jinyan joined the army and was stationed at the seaside all year round. He could not return home even once a year, so first uncle's family was quite peaceful so far. As if thinking of something, Madame Lee's eyes suddenly became serious. She said in a low voice, Li Yuan, since Li Jinyan is back, you should visit your grandfather's house more these days. Your grandfather still cares about his eldest grandson, Li Jinyan. Don't let him take all the benefits. Li Yuan twitched the corner of his mouth and refused, No, it's boring. Let my sister go. She likes the treasures in grandfather's hands. If you don't go, I will go. It just so happens that I have 4 days off. I can go and accompany grandfather and little grandma. Du Jiayi agreed immediately. She also thought about the treasures in grandfather's hands. Those were all antiques. It was said that many of them were the palace treasures that great-grandfather swept when he was a warlord. Little grandma, who wanted to take out the treasures in grandfather's hands, would definitely be happy for her to go. Madame Li nodded, That's fine. Don't provoke Li Jinyan in the future. Although your grandfather also wants to leave good things for me and your third uncle, Li Jinyan is the eldest grandson of the Li family after all. Although your grandfather dotes on you, he will never do more than his eldest grandson. The family whispered from time to time in the car and only stopped when they reached home. Li Jinyan, who had just returned home, was now sitting on an aged sofa made of yellow pear wood. He had a cold expression on his face as he chatted with the two elders. Although he said that he was accompanying Zhang Xian, he was actually just sitting by the side and listening quietly. Tomorrow is that last Jiayi's birthday. Old master, now that third brother's child is back, why don't you let Jinyan bring his brothers over tomorrow? Let third brother's child recognize everyone. Otherwise, when he goes out in the future, he won't be able to recognize everyone. That would be too disrespectful. The one who spoke was Old Man Lee. She was 15 years younger than Old Man Lee. She took good care of herself, so her hair was still dark. She wore an old-fashioned modified cheongsam, which made her look particularly elegant and dignified. She spoke unhurriedly with a soft accent. Just by listening to her, one could tell that she had a good voice when she was young. Li Jinyan, who had been silent all this time, raised his eyes when his name was mentioned. He said indifferently, "My leave is limited. I still have a meeting tomorrow. Sorry, I don't have time." "Is that so? I didn't think it through," Old Madam Lee said with some disappointment. She looked at Old Master Lee and deliberated for a moment before saying, "Then I'll bring her over. There's no need to trouble Jinyan. As for the gift, Old Master, why don't you give Jai the painting that second brother drew? This lass has liked it for a long time, and I've never been willing to give it to her." Chapter 21:11. Among the descendants left behind by her elder sister, only her second son made her slightly satisfied. He didn't care about anything and didn't care about his family. He carried a picture clip and walked the world, becoming a famous painter both domestically and abroad. She had several of his paintings in her hands, and any one of them was worth hundreds of thousands. Li Jinyan had no interest in these things. Seeing that it was getting late, he got up and said to the white-haired and white-bearded Old Man Lee, who was sitting on the sofa, "I won't disturb you anymore. Rest early." He nodded slightly at Old Lady Lee, put on his military cap, and left. Old Lady Lee, who was watching his back, secretly clenched her fists. She didn't even want her old face anymore. She just hoped that he would say something and let the old man open his mouth and give the painting to her granddaughter. In the end, he was the same as his father. He just didn't let her have her way. It would be good if everyone in the first branch died outside, so that one or two of them wouldn't come to anger her. "I have no objections if you want to leave the good things for third son. Third son's surname is Lee. No matter who he leaves it for, it will be a descendant of the Lee family." Old Man Lee's old but strong voice suddenly sounded. Old Lady Lee was so shocked that she quickly loosened her fists and quickly adjusted her expression, making every wrinkle on her face appear benevolent. "Forget about Jai. Her surname is Du, and she's not a descendant of the Lee family. I will keep the things I give her, but they won't be good things. I won't leave them for her, but I won't treat her unfairly either." Inside the house, the gloomy Old Master Lee raised his voice as if he wanted someone to hear him. Jinyan is the eldest grandson of the Lee family, and he's also the most promising one. Naturally, I have to leave the things in my hands to him. And the things I give you, you naturally have to leave them for third son's family. It's just a small birthday. What are you trying to do? Do you need the eldest grandson of the Lee family to congratulate you? Did they come to Jinyan's birthday? As his grandmother, have you ever thought of giving him something good? The more she spoke, the more respectful Old Lady Lee's expression became. It seemed that her relationship with Old Man Lee wasn't like husband and wife, but more like master and servant. Old Madam Lee, who had lived cautiously all her life, did not dare to show any disrespect to this husband who could control her life and death back then. Hearing this, he smiled and nodded. "You're right. The Lee family's things naturally have to be left to the Lee family's descendants. As long as Old Master Lin still had third brother in his heart, she would naturally compensate Jai." The lights in the rooms of the mansion went out one by one. Soon, only the street lamps outside the house and the corridor were illuminated. Li Jinyan, who walked out of the mansion, looked back at the mahogany door plaque, and a faint sneer appeared in his cold eyes. Lee Mansion. He really did not have any kinship with the Lee residents. The only kinship he had left was with his maternal grandfather's family. As for the things left for him, Li Jinyan raised his head and rubbed the left side of his face. His eyebrows were cold. Would a person who had once yelled at him to get out of the Li family suddenly treat his so-called eldest grandson well? He wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits, and he deliberately said those words loudly. He was probably plotting something again. Li Jinyan walked out of the Li residence with a cold look in his eyes. When he was outside, he took out his phone and dialed a number that had been turned off for the past 2 days. Surprisingly, it actually went through this time. Xia Jinyuan was also very surprised. He deliberately looked at the caller ID before saying, "Demon King." "Yes, in the capital. In the military." He sat in the car he drove and did not start the engine. He asked Xia Jinyuan calmly, "Come out for a visit in the capital. Forget about the military." Xia Jinyuan, who was still in the military, smiled and said, "I'm in the capital, but I can't come out for a visit yet. I'm still detained in the military and will only be released in about 2 hours. But if you don't mind waiting, you can wait for me at the military hospital. I still have to go there after I'm done with my work." Chapter 21:12. Li Jinyan was not in the mood to chat with his friends, so he said, "I'll wait for you outside the military headquarters." Then he hung up the phone and drove straight to the military headquarters. V8, who was waiting in the car, was so shocked that his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw Li Jinyan. When Xia Jinyuan came out of the car, he saw the 2 idiots chatting in the cold wind. It was midnight, yet they would rather stand outside in the cold wind than get into the car to warm up. Were they doing cold resistance training? Naturally, trained special forces soldiers could chat in the cold wind, but Sun Dongqing could not. She was so cold when she got off the plane that her whole body was almost frozen. Wearing a cotton coat, she could not resist the cold wind at all. She had no choice but to go back to the store in the airport lobby to buy a down jacket. Feeling warm, Sun Dongqing hurriedly turned on her phone. A few text messages popped up. Sun Dongqing took a look. Even though it was already past midnight, she couldn't wait any longer and immediately called Yi Jifan. Yi Jifan was in a daze when he heard the phone on the bedside table vibrate non-stop. He did not turn on the lights, so he reached out to pick up the phone and said in a hoarse voice, "Hello." Then he was startled awake by Sun Dongqing's howling. Old Yi, something big happened. Something big happened to Yingying." Yi Jifan's eardrums hurt from her piercing voice. He frowned and said in a deep voice, "Yingying is in Beijing with me. What could possibly happen to her? You must be confused from sleeping too much. Sun Dongqing, can you stop making a fuss all day long? Someone sent a video to our house. It was the package I received yesterday. I thought it was material for you." Sun Dongqing, who was finally able to talk to her husband, suddenly had a backbone. She quickly told him the whole story. "What should we do? What should we do? I asked her to study abroad so that she could make a name for herself, but in the end, this damn girl did something shameless. Old Yi, I'm afraid we're really in big trouble." Yi Jifan got up from the bed with a livid face and said angrily, "Take a taxi to Wangfu Hotel right now. Call me when you're downstairs and I'll come down to pick you up. Remember, don't let the hotel staff see your face. Also, hold on to the videotape in your hands." Something big had happened, something really big had happened this time. After hanging up the phone, Yi Jifan's face was gloomy as if a storm was about to come. He put on his clothes, opened the door with force, and walked to the next room. He kept ringing the doorbell impatiently. Yiying was having a beautiful dream. She dreamt that she had married into the Du family and had become Li Yuan's wife. Just as she was exchanging rings with Li Yuan, she suddenly saw Yi Qian walking over from the front. Just as she was about to provoke her with a smile, the ear-piercing sound of police sirens came from outside the church. Yi Ying quivered and opened her eyes. There was no sound of the police car, but the doorbell rang clearly. It was ringing very urgently. Yi Ying, whose beautiful dream was interrupted, got up from the bed with a gloomy face. She was angry, but she did not dare to open the door directly. She looked through the electronic eye and saw that it was her father. Only then did she suppress the anger in her heart and open the door. "Dad, why aren't you asleep yet?" she said unhappily. "I was sleeping soundly." "Why did you wake me up?" "I have to go to Mrs. Lee's house early in the morning tomorrow. If I don't sleep well, I won't even look good with makeup." Yi Jifan, who was so angry that his chest was heaving up and down, did not speak immediately. Instead, he walked into the room. Yi Ying, who was still in a daze, did not realize that something was wrong with him. She closed and locked the door. Just as she turned around, a black shadow flashed past her eyes. "Pa!" She was slapped hard on the face as she was caught off guard. Chapter 21:13. Yi Ying was stunned by the slap. She covered her face and stared at Yi Jifan in disbelief. After a few seconds, she asked loudly, "Dad, what are you doing? Instead of sleeping at night, you came here to slap me. What are you trying to do? What did I do wrong? Did I make you unhappy? You still have the cheek to ask me what you did wrong." Yi Jifan slapped Yi Ying's left cheek again without any hesitation. The two slaps left 10 red fingerprints on Yi Ying's cheeks. Yi Ying, whose mouth tasted of rust, widened her eyes. Tears welled up in her almond-shaped eyes. She screamed, "Am I your biological daughter? Am I your biological daughter? You came here and slapped me twice without any reason. Dad, are you trying to beat me to death? If you weren't my biological daughter, I would strangle you to death right now." Yi Jifan was so angry that his face turned the color of a pig's liver. After he slapped her with all his strength, his vision turned black. Yi Ying, who felt wronged, wailed, "I'm not your daughter. I'm not your daughter. I want to go back to the southern province. I want to find Mommy." She was as wronged as a 5 or 6-year-old child. "Since when did you treat me as your biological daughter? All you do is compare me to Yi Qian. You say that I'm not as good as him here and there. You belittle me to the point that I'm worthless. Now you come here and hit me. Dad, since when did you treat me as your daughter?" After being slapped twice for no reason, Yi Ying felt as wronged as a child who had lost her parents. She screamed until her eyes were about to pop out. Yi Jifan looked at his daughter coldly. Not only did the anger in his heart not dissipate, it burned even more fiercely. He didn't understand how his daughter had become like this. When she was young, she was clearly smart and clever. She was like a jade carving that was loved by everyone. At that time, he thought, forget it. If I don't have a son, so be it. If I have a smart daughter, as long as I nurture her well, she will be better than other people who secretly give birth to a son. He really thought so back then. But now, he regretted it. He regretted it. She regretted not giving birth to a son and bringing him home. She regretted raising such a shameless thing. She still had the cheek to coax him and call him that. She was shameless. Yi Jifan turned on the lights in the room. As soon as the bright and luxurious crystal chandelier lit up the room, Yi Ying, who was screaming, saw clearly how ugly Yi Jifan's expression was. However, she didn't understand what she had done wrong during the day. She couldn't accept being slapped twice in the middle of the night. Tomorrow, she still had to go to the Du family to accompany Madame Li on stage. Tomorrow, She still had to get to know the young masters and young misses of the more powerful families. How could she, who had been slapped twice in the face anyone? You keep saying that I'm your daughter, but do you treat me as your daughter? You clearly know how important tomorrow is to me, but you came up and gave me 2 slaps. How can I face anyone tomorrow? Can you meet anyone? Is that bitch Yi Qian your real daughter? All day long, you only say that she's better than me. When have you ever said that I'm better than her? No. Never. The more she blamed him, the angrier Yi Jifan became. He pointed at Yi Ying, who still dared to challenge him, and shouted fiercely, tell me everything you did in France. WH. What? France. France. Chapter 21:14. Before she could say anything, Yi Ying was shocked when she heard the word France. Her scream stopped abruptly, and her almond-shaped eyes, which had been full of grievances, were suddenly filled with panic. You've been wronged, haven't you? Well, tell me all the nonsense you've been doing in France. Changing boyfriends every week. Running to a bar to be hugged by 2 men. Not going back to the dorm in the middle of the night and going to a hotel with a man. Yi Ying, do you still feel wronged? Don't you think you're shameless? Yi Ying was completely shocked. How could it be? How could it be? It was so long ago. How could Dad know about it? Her expression made Yi Jifan even more certain that these things were true. They were all true. Yi Jifan clenched his teeth as the anger in his heart grew stronger. The anger on his face surged directly between his eyebrows. He shot a murderous look at Yi Ying, which made Yi Ying step back in fear. She was scared. She was scared. She was really scared that she wouldn't be able to walk out of the hotel room. Yi Ying's cowardly retreat made Yi Jifan's face burn with anger. Unable to restrain his anger, he lifted his foot and fiercely stomped on the coffee table. Still not satisfied, he picked up the cups and plates on the coffee table and threw them all at Yi Ying. The first coffee cup hit Yi Ying's shoulder, and the frightened Yi Ying came back to her senses. Then, she saw several cups and plates being thrown at her. Yi Ying was so scared that she immediately covered her head and screamed, "Ah, ah." Who told Dad? Who hurt her behind her back? No, she definitely couldn't admit what she did. That's right, she couldn't admit it. What happened in France was in the past. She even called her ex-boyfriends and told them to be gentlemanly and not to talk about it. They all agreed. As long as they didn't say anything, no one would know. Even if Dad went to investigate, he wouldn't be able to find any evidence. She still didn't know that the biggest evidence was in Sun Dongqing's hands. Now, she was on her way to the hotel. Facing the thunderous anger of Yi Jifan, Yi Ying, who was trembling in fear, shrank into the corner of the cabinet. Her long hair was scattered, her cheeks were red and swollen, and her tears were flowing. She looked really pitiful. This was the first time she had seen Yi Jifan so angry. She was very scared. She clutched her shoulder that was hurt to the bone. Her heart and mind were racing. She had to think of a way. She had to think of a way. Dad, I didn't. Who did you hear it from? I'm going there to study. How can I join a bar? How can I have a boyfriend? I didn't. Someone framed me, that's right, someone must have framed me. It's Yi, it must be Yi Qian, that bitch. She knew that I was going to join the army, so she set me up. Dad, how could you listen to her? She clearly doesn't want me to be a soldier. You can't listen to her, you can't. Instead of thinking about how to make up for his mistakes, he only wanted to shirk his responsibilities. He was too disappointed. Even if she set you up, it's because she had something on you first. You didn't do those shameless things, so who would set you up? What could they use to set you up? You said Yi Qian set you up because she didn't want you to be a soldier. But she didn't even know you were in the army. Yi Zhifan hadn't seen the videotape yet. After his anger, he felt exhausted. Yi Ying, you disappoint me. I'm completely disappointed in you. Yi Ying, who was about to faint from crying, tried her best to shrink her shoulders and cover her face with her hands to prevent further injury. Her voice was hoarse from crying. She knows, Dad, she knows. Chapter 21:15. She had to make her father believe that Yi Qian framed her. Only by making him believe that she would not be beaten again. She burst into tears and pushed all the blame onto Yi Qian. She knew, and that's why she framed me. There's no one else other than her. Dad, I really didn't do anything to embarrass you and Mom. I really didn't. Dad, you have to believe me. You have to believe me. It's really Yi Qian who framed me. She framed me. She had to make her father believe her. Otherwise, she would not have an easy time tonight. Yi Ying's eyes flashed as she covered her face with her hands. She would never admit to the ridiculous things she did in France. She had to make her father believe that it was Yi Qian who framed her. She had never done anything to embarrass her parents. Suddenly, Yi Ying was glad that she told Yi Qian during her physical examination that time and let her know that she had enlisted. Otherwise, she would not have been able to push all the blame onto her today. Moreover, other than Yi Qian, she could not think of anyone else who would frame her. Yi Qian. Yi Qian. How dare you frame me? Fine. 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 If I don't have an easy time, you won't have an easy time either. Yi Ying, who hated Yi Qian to the core, only wanted to push Yi Qian out when something happened. Just like when she was young, she only needed to push Yi Qian out whenever she did something wrong. The one who was beaten and scolded was always Yi Qian. It had never had anything to do with her. This time, there was no exception. Yi Ying, who was screaming her grievances, was afraid that Yi Zhifan would do something irrational to her in his rage. She tried her best to reduce her presence. She hugged her shoulders and curled into a ball in a corner. She did look very pitiful. She didn't dare to speak to Yi Zhifan directly. She only glanced at him from time to time. Every time she glanced at him, she would be frightened by Yi Zhifan's ferocious expression. The more scared she was, the more her body trembled. The more she trembled, the more she wanted to use pity and grievance to make Yi Zhifan feel sorry for her. She didn't dare to say that she wasn't Yi Zhifan's daughter anymore. She only hoped that she could get some pity from him so that she could escape this calamity. How could Yi Zhifan, who was so angry that his vision was turning black, feel sorry for him? He really wanted to strangle this disobedient bastard to death with his own hands. How did Yi Qian know that you joined the army? How did she know? How would you know? He slowly sat down on the sofa after standing there for a long time. He stared at the stubborn Yi Ying and asked, how did she find out? How did Yi Qian know? Yi Zhifan already had an answer in his heart. Other than the mother and daughter pair, who else would sue Yi Qian? Who else knew that Yi Ying was about to join the army? To be safe, he didn't even mention it to his colleagues at the bureau. Yi Ying sobbed, tears and snot flowing down her face. I told Mom. Last time, during the physical examination, Mom and I bumped into Yi Qian. We couldn't help but tell him. He had repeatedly warned her not to tell anyone before she actually joined the army. In the end, the mother and daughter pair told Yi Qian. At this moment, Yi Jifan seemed to have aged a lot. But even if Yi Qian knew about it, she didn't have the ability to get her hands on the videotape unless she had someone backing her up. But would there really be someone like that willing to help Yi Qian? She sent the videotape directly to his home. Did she send it to other places? Did she send it to other people? Or did she send it to his colleagues? What about the provincial government? Chapter 21:16. No, he couldn't just suspect Yi Qian. The most suspicious people should be his political opponents who were trying to sabotage him. Only they had the ability to get their hands on the videotape. However, they weren't trying to sabotage him. They were openly telling him that they had the videotape of his daughter's scandalous deeds. If Ying was innocent and upright, why would they try to sabotage her? A fly wouldn't stare at a flawless egg. He had left evidence that could be used against him. Who could he blame? So, you suspect Yi Qian of sabotaging you? Are you trying to tell me that you didn't do anything that would embarrass the adults in France? Yi Jifan's gaze was cold as he asked in a low voice, do you dare say that you didn't do anything that would make you a laughingstock and embarrass you? Raise your head. Look at me and answer. Do you dare say that you were sabotaged? Do you dare to say it? Yi Ying's fingers were trembling violently. She didn't dare to raise her head or say it. However, she had to raise her head and say it. She removed her hands from her face and dug her fingers into her palms. I didn't. It was Yi Qian who sabotaged me. Other than him, who else would go to such great lengths to sabotage me? Fine. She was still stubborn even at this point. The look in her eyes said it all, but she still pushed all the blame to Yi Jian. Yi Jifan, whose blood was boiling, nodded coldly. Okay, I hope you can continue to be stubborn later. He was too disappointed. He was really too disappointed. She dared to do it but didn't dare to admit it. She didn't know how to solve the problem. She was so stupid that she only knew how to frame others. Fine. She didn't have any skills. Other than talking, she didn't do anything else. She was useless. She was just like her mother. Yi Jifan's chest was heaving up and down. He panted heavily and didn't say anything else. Yi Ying, who was trembling in fear and crying, didn't dare to get up. She huddled in a corner and hoped that time would pass quickly. When Sun Dongqing arrived at the hotel, it was almost 4:00 in the morning. When she saw Yi Jifan's gloomy expression, she was furious. Where's the disgrace? Where is it? I must teach her a lesson tonight. The thing that she hated the most was done by her own daughter. Hugging, and even getting a room. How could she have such a cheap daughter? That videotape was a slap to her face. Her face was burning hot. It really hurt. What a good daughter you've raised. Yi Jifan glared at him and said through gritted teeth, my Ying is the best. Yes, your Ying is the best. This was her goodness. This is the good that you've taught. I've really learned something new. Sun Dongqing was not as protective as before. She rolled up her sleeves and took a step forward. What a disgrace. I'm going to beat her to death today. Yi Ying was overjoyed by Sun Dongqing's appearance. Her eyes, which were red from crying, shone brightly. She cried out miserably, Mom, save me. She got up with disheveled hair and threw herself at Sun Dongqing. Her savior was here, her savior was here. As long as her mother was here, her father wouldn't be able to touch her. What welcomed her was not Sun Dongqing's protection, but 2 slaps that were louder than before. Not just one, but countless slaps, punches, kicks. Sun Dongqing, who was so angry that she had lost her rationality, punched and kicked her. I'm going to beat you to death, you disgrace, you disgrace. Chapter 21:17. Yi Ying, who had never been hit by Sun Dongqing before, was horrified. Compared to Yi Jifan's 2 slaps, Sun Dongqing's was much more violent. Mom. I didn't, aw, it hurts, Mom, stop hitting me, I really didn't. Yi Ying, who was beaten to the ground, bent her body and desperately protected her face and head. She was overwhelmed with horror. How could this be? How could this be? Why didn't her mother help her? Why? Yi Ying screamed and begged for mercy, but Sun Dongqing beat her even more fiercely. I didn't send you to study abroad so that you could learn to sleep with foreign devils. I didn't want you to be a prostitute. I didn't want you to change your boyfriend every week. I'll beat you to death, you shameless thing. You can live a good life, but you have to humiliate yourself. If you want to find a boyfriend, fine, I won't stop you, but you should find me a boyfriend like Mrs. Li's son. Find a foreign devil to sleep with. Shameless thing, who did you learn this from? Just as Sun Dongqing was about to kick Yi Ying's head, Yi Jifan, who was expressionless, frowned and grabbed his wife who had lost her mind. That's enough. If she continued, she might really beat Yi Ying to death. Sun Dongqing was a barbarian and a shrew. When she lost her mind, she was even more ruthless than Yi Jifan. In this way, Yi Jifan's attitude was much gentler. There was a video recorder in the hotel. Yi Jifan put in the tape. After a while, Yi Ying, who was wearing heavy makeup, appeared in the video. She was intimately dancing with a blonde man on the dance floor of the KTV. After seeing this scene, Yi Jifan, who was so angry that the veins on his temples bulged, closed his eyes. It wasn't a trap. This was to tell him that his daughter, Yi Jifan, was a slut abroad. Yi Ying, who was bruised all over, was completely dumbfounded. How could it be? How could these things be recorded into a tape? Who was it that messed with her? The image flashed, and it showed her hugging and kissing the golden-haired man dancing on the sofa. The man's hand lifted her shirt and reached for her chest. The image was very clear, as if someone was filming it right in front of her. No, it's not like that. Don't look. All of a sudden, Yi Ying rushed up like a madwoman. She was so flustered that she was out of her wits. She tried to take out the tape from the VCR and destroy it. The more anxious she was, the more confused she became. The more confused she was, the more she couldn't take out the tape. She screamed in panic, picked up the VCR, and threw it against the wall. No, she didn't do those things, she didn't. The noise was so loud that it woke up the guest in the other room. Soon, the hotel staff and the lobby manager arrived. Because of this guest, Yi Ying did not continue to be beaten up by Sun Dongqing. After explaining and sending the lobby manager away, Yi Jifan sat on the sofa and said coldly, "You don't have to go to Miss Du's birthday party tomorrow. You don't have to join the army. I'm going to book the tickets now. You go back to Shuku village tonight." "No, I don't want to. I don't agree." Yi Ying screamed, "Mrs. Li likes me so much that she wants me to be her daughter-in-law. I must go tomorrow." She crawled to Sun Dongqing on her knees and hugged her feet. She cried until she was out of breath and begged, "Mom, please persuade Dad. I must go to Mrs. Li's house tomorrow." Chapter 21:18. Scared, Yi Ying was scared. Even Sun Dongqing, who loved her the most, had hit her. Yi Ying was scared. She didn't know why she was so sure that she had done something shameful in France. It was as if she had seen her ridiculous life when she was studying abroad. She couldn't accept her fate. She wouldn't accept her fate so easily. She had to convince her mother to stand by her side. She had to convince her. Yi Ying was also a character. She could always find all kinds of excuses to make herself feel at ease and comfort herself when she was in a desperate situation. She could also shamelessly think that she had done nothing wrong and that it was all the people who wanted to hurt her who were wrong. The videotape, it didn't matter. Who hadn't been young and frivolous? Who hadn't lost themselves? Li Yuan, just like Li Yuan. He was also studying abroad. She didn't believe that he hadn't had a few girlfriends. Hugging Sun Dongqing's legs, Ying felt like she was hugging a piece of driftwood that wouldn't let her drown. With a red and swollen face, she kept saying, "Didn't you say that if I wanted to find a boyfriend, I should find a boyfriend like Mrs. Li's son? I have a chance. I really have a chance. Mom, Mrs. Li really said during dinner that she wanted me to be her son's girlfriend. It's true. I didn't lie to you. I didn't lie to you. I want to go. I must go. If I don't go, I won't have a chance. Mom, I'm begging you. Please help me. I'm your daughter. You love me the most. Please help me. Please help me." She begged bitterly. She couldn't go back. It was really over if she went back. Dad would definitely not care about her anymore. He would definitely have another child and raise another child well. She could only stay in the mountains for the rest of her life and become a joke. I admit that I didn't behave well in France, but it was all the same. I had no choice. I really wanted to study when I went there, but everyone was playing together. If I didn't join in, they isolated me and said that I was pretending to be noble. They even blocked me. Mom, I was scared. You and Dad threw me abroad and thought that I would have a good life. Wrong, wrong, it was all wrong. I was scared. I was really, really scared. But what could I do? When I didn't stay with them, they ganged up on me. Mom, you don't know how scared I was for the past week. They locked me in the toilet, locked me out of the dormitory, changed my shampoo to detergent, and threw my clothes into the toilet. What can I do? I don't want to be bullied. I can only be like them. I was forced. I was forced. She put the bullying incident on herself and made herself the target of bullying. The more Ying spoke, the more she believed that she was forced to do so. Sun Dongqing had never heard of this before. When she heard Yi Ying's words, she was furious. She turned around and focused on them that Yi Ying mentioned. Why didn't you tell us? My daughter, they are forcing you to your death. Looking at her daughter whom she had doted on for 20 years, Sun Dongqing, who had beaten and scolded her, felt her heart soften. She thought that her daughter had abandoned herself, but in the end, she was forced to do so. Being forced and abandoning oneself were two completely different things. That was because she did not protect her daughter well. No matter how shameful her daughter was, it was her parents' fault. Old Yi, you. Sun Dongqing, whose attitude had softened, was about to speak when she was coldly interrupted by Yi Zhifan. Forced you? Yi Ying, you can lie to your mother, but do you think you can lie to me? Chapter 21:19. As soon as Yi Zhifan opened his mouth, Yi Ying panicked. I found you a prestigious French university, not some random university. Force you? Yi Ying, you can lie to your mother and yourself. No one can force you. You're the one who degenerated. Every word made Yi Ying feel like she was falling into an abyss. Her heart sank to the bottom. Sun Dongqing, who was holding Yi Ying's shoulders tightly, knew that her husband would not lie to her about this. Then, her daughter was lying to her just now. Mom, Mom, Mom. Yi-ing did not dare to say that her shoulders were hurting. She knew that only by crying out in pain could Sun Dongqing's heart soften. She was thinking quickly about how to get away. Yi Zhifan, who had decided to give up on Yi-ing, pressed on, Sun Dongqing, do you think the other party only has one videotape? Can you guarantee that they didn't send more videotapes to my station? My colleague. Do you really think it's just a videotape? Sun Dongqing, can you grow a brain? Now, someone doesn't want your daughter to enter the army. Do you understand? He pointed at the videotape that was broken by Yi-ing and growled darkly, can you guarantee that the other party won't send the videotape to the army after Yi-ing enters the army? She did not know. She only knew that her daughter had done something shameful. She had to teach her a lesson so that she would not do something shameful again in the future. As for other things, she did not think about it. After being reminded, Sun Dongqing panicked and stammered, no, is there really no other way? We can only go back to the village. What do you think? Yi Zhifan, who had a headache that was about to explode, quickly rubbed his temples. Ideas came one after another. If they could not find the person who sent the videotape, Yi-ing would not be able to leave the village, let alone enter the army. As for marrying into the Du family, don't even think about it. Once the videotape fell into Mrs. Li's hands, the whole family would be finished. Yi-ing, who was crying so hard, saw that her mother's attitude softened. She immediately continued to plead, there is a way, there is a way. As long as Mrs. Li treats me well, no one will dare to offend our family. Mom, I will marry into the Du family. Believe me, I will definitely marry into the Du family. Li Yuan has a good impression of me. He even asked me to look for him when I'm free in the future. He'll take me out to play. The deputy chief of staff Du also agreed. Mrs. Li also asked Li Yuan to take care of me. Mom, did you hear that? She wants me to marry Li Yuan, right? Sun Dongqing felt that her daughter's words made sense, but when she saw Yi Zhifan's ferocious expression, she swallowed her words. Chapter 21-20. If his daughter was useless, he could find another surrogate, but he could not lose his position. The person behind the jade instructed him to build a relationship with the Du family, so he definitely did not want to see him fall out with the Du family. After weighing the pros and cons, giving up Yi-ing was the best choice. As Yi Qian said, for his career, Yi Zhifan would definitely disown his family. Whoever stopped him, he would be ruthless, even if his own daughter stood in his way. Yi Zhifan, who had made up his mind, said coldly, Mrs. Li has a good impression of you. Yi-ing, you think too highly of yourself. If you sent the videotape to Mrs. Li's house, what do you think will happen to you? Yes, Mrs. Li did reveal that she wanted her son to marry you, but did you live up to her expectations? No. You left such a big weakness for others to use against you. This is a bomb that will blow up our whole family and make us lose everything. If we did not have a relationship with the Du family, this videotape would at most make our whole family lose face. But now, once Mrs. Li watches the videotape, she will not let you go, and she will not let me go. Sun Dongqing, if I am finished, my whole family will be finished. The power of the last sentence was no less than a bomb thrown into Sun Dongqing's heart, blowing away her stupidity and miraculously understanding the predicament in front of her. Now that she had completely understood what Yi-ing meant, she howled and punched Yi-ing's shoulder hard. What sin have I committed to give birth to such a disgraceful thing like you? It is not easy to find a general's wife who likes you, you actually. Sun Dongqing, who was sad from the heart, punched Yi-ing and then punched her own chest hard. Her heart was so painful, so painful. Such a good opportunity, gone again. Gone again. Seeing that her father would not help her, Yi Ying, who was desperate, cried and got up. Mom, don't be angry, I was wrong, I was wrong. She hugged Sun Dongqing and suddenly said in a low voice, Mom, if you don't help me, Dad will not want you, and he will not want me. Sun Dongqing, whose body suddenly stiffened, heard her daughter say, Dad is only in his early 40s, the golden age for men. As long as he wants to have children, with his official position, there are many young and beautiful women who want to give birth to his children. Mom, you must help me go to the Du family. I can't be fooled by Dad. He didn't want me to go because he was afraid that he would offend the Deputy Chief of Staff Du. Madam Li likes me. Mom, I'm confident that I can win her heart. I'm also confident that Li Yuan won't be able to run away. Tomorrow is my last chance. If I miss it, Mom, both you and I will be abandoned by Dad. Don't say that Dad doesn't dare, he dares. I can't compete with you over Dad. Mom, you can't compete with him over what he wants to do, and neither can I. So, I'm going to take a gamble. If we win the bet, we win. His words touched Sun Dongqing's heart. That's right, that's right. Her daughter was right. Once the mother and daughter returned to Shuka village, everything would be over. They would become the laughingstock of the entire village. But what should he do? She didn't have any other ideas and could only let her daughter figure it out herself. The mother and daughter hugged each other. Yi Jifan, who had a splitting headache, didn't say anything else. He glanced coldly at Yi Ying, got up, and said to Sun Dongqing, look after her. I'll go back to my room and book tickets for you two to go home. He didn't know that when he went back to his room to book the tickets, Sun Dongqing and Yi Ying left Wangfu Hotel in a hurry. He also didn't know that the mother and daughter had caused a huge disaster. Chapter 21-21. It was 5:00 in the morning, and the cold wind blew through the capital city. Occasionally, there would be some noises on the streets, and after that, there was only the quiet street lights waiting for dawn. Yi Ying did not dare to stay any longer. She staggered into a taxi with Sun Dongqing and gave the driver the name of a chain hotel in the country. She desperately wanted to escape from Yi Jifan's control. What should she do tomorrow? She did not have a solution now. Mom, I have to put ice on my face to reduce the swelling. Forget about my body, I'll wear a long-sleeved dress. Yi Ying quickly spoke to Sun Dongqing in dialect after getting into the taxi. What should she do next? She did not have a solution now. She had to go to the Du family and attend Du Jiai's birthday party first. Then, she took out her phone and quickly sent a text to Li Yuan. The text basically said that her mother was worried and came over. She did not know why she quarreled with her father. She failed to stop them and was accidentally injured. In short, she tried her best to explain the injuries on her body and face. Sun Dongqing glanced at the text and saw that she was a little embarrassed. Her expression made Yi Ying narrow her eyes. Deep resentment flashed through her swollen eyes. Not only did she hate Yi Jifan, but she also hated Sun Dongqing. Sun Dongqing, who was wrapping ice in a towel, did not notice and said, how could I not know that Mrs. Li really wanted you to be her daughter-in-law? When I saw the videotape, I was so angry that I almost fainted. Ying, whether you were forced or not, you did such a thing. Speaking of the videotape, Sun Dongqing was angry again. She pressed the ice in her hand on Yi Ying's face. With this videotape, even if you really marry into the Du family in the future, you will still be on tenterhooks. Mom, why do you keep looking at the past? Do you think everyone is clean? They are all the same. Li Yuan is still studying in the United States, which is a very open country. The number of girlfriends he had could fill several buses. Can you stop talking about it? Seeing her bruised face in the mirror, Yi Ying was irritated. If you keep thinking about the past, why don't you quickly reduce the swelling on my face? When I marry into the Du family, you can just enjoy life with me. It had to be said that Yi Ying was very good at coaxing Sun Dongqing. Sun Dongqing, who originally wanted to strangle Yi Ying to death, was busy getting ice cubes for Yi Ying and spraying anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving spray for Yi Ying. She was so busy that her heels didn't even touch the ground. Li Jinyan was also running around. He didn't expect that he would become Xia Jinyuan's errand boy when he arrived at the hospital. There were examinations, forms, stitches, and medication. By the time they were done, it was already early in the morning. Xia Jinyuan, who had finally cleaned up the pus in the wound and was stitched up again, lay lazily on the hospital bed and chatted with Li Jinyan, who was resting on the hospital bed. You came here in the middle of the night to talk to me about the overseas competition. Is your time that tight? I haven't seen the specific list of people on our side, and the Major General didn't mention to me who will be going either. When the list is out, we will arrange a training session to improve our teamwork. Li Jinyan, who was resting with his eyes closed, just wanted to find someone to talk to. The list was secondary. When he heard Yi Ying, he said calmly, "You are injured now, how are you going to arrange the training?" Yi Qian should also be selected. Her schedule isn't easy to arrange. It had been a month since the last training session. She should have started school by now. Chapter 21-22. If she does well this time, the school won't have too many problems. If she doesn't, I'm afraid they won't let her go. After all, the school doesn't know what she's training for. After Xia Jinyuan finished speaking, he thought for a while and said, "Actually, you can say that she's training for the competition. The National University of Science and Technology often sends students to participate in the competition. She can do it too. I'll call you later to ask about the situation. You should know about Yi Qian's results." When they talked about the military, Li Jinyan's slightly depressed mood suddenly became a lot more cheerful. After resting for a while, he got up, straightened his military uniform, and said calmly, "Rest well. I'll go to the military headquarters for a meeting." Xia Jinyuan, who could tell that he had something on his mind, looked at him meaningfully and said with a half-smile, "You're in a good mood so quickly. Are you sure you don't need to talk to me anymore so that I can talk to you?" "Talking to Yi Qian can indeed improve my mood quickly." Faced with his comrade's teasing, the handsome and cold Li Jinyan calmly replied. That one sentence made Major Xia choke in his throat. After he calmed down, Major Xia smiled and said, "Major Li, Yi Qian is my girlfriend." "You're late." "So what if she's your girlfriend?" "She's also my comrade." "Ha, she's also my comrade." "She's both my girlfriend and my comrade." Major Xia, who was now the boyfriend, calmly responded to the sudden provocation, "You're not interested in stealing your comrade's girlfriend." He was indeed not interested in being immoral, but... Li Jinyan looked at his former opponent, who was now his comrade, and sneered, "Didn't I tell you before? Yi Qian gives me a familiar feeling." "Major Xia, wait for me to check it out. When the time comes, it'll be hard to say what your identity and mine will be. Check it out." Xia Jinyuan's smile did not fade, but his eyes darkened. He said in a deep voice, "Devil, Yi Qian's situation is a little special." "What do you want to check?" "The situation is a little special." Li Jinyan, who was about to leave, sat back on the bed and asked coldly, "What happened? What I'm investigating here, could it possibly affect her?" His eyes suddenly turned cold and sharp as he said, "Or do you know what I'm investigating?" "Someone is investigating it too." This time, it was Xia Jinyuan's turn. His eyes suddenly turned cold and sharp. He stared at Li Jinyan, and even his voice was frosty. Devil, what did you find out about Yi Jian? He was a major and a marine. What right did he have to investigate Yi Qian? Check the relationship between Yi Qian and my family. Since it was related to Yi Qian, Li Jinyan did not hide anything. I want to know why I feel a sense of familiarity with her. The relationship between the little fox and the Li family. Xia Jinyuan did not expect to be asked such a question. He could not help but chuckle. How could she be related to the Li family? The Li family used to be a warlord. Yi Qian's family has been farmers for 3 generations. How could they have anything to do with you? Knowing that no one was investigating the same thing as him, the sharpness in Li Jinyan's eyes gradually disappeared. That's why I want to check it out. He calmed down and said indifferently, otherwise, I'll always wonder why I feel a sense of familiarity with Yi Qian. It was not a sense of familiarity between a man and a woman. At first glance, he felt a sense of déjà vu, so much so that he misunderstood that he might like Yi Qian. When he found out about the relationship between Xia Jinyuan and Yi Qian, he did not feel sad, nor did he feel jealous. Instead, he felt relieved. These 2 feelings puzzled him, so he had no choice but to investigate. Xia Jinyuan felt that it was a fantasy. How could it be possible? Chapter 21-23. Demon King, perhaps you can think of the so-called sense of familiarity as a kind of appreciation between the strong. Looking at his stubborn comrade, Xia Jinyuan felt helpless. I once conducted a detailed investigation on Yi Qian. The military has also investigated her. Devil, I can tell you with certainty that she has nothing to do with the Li family. If she does, the military will definitely find out. The military has detailed information on 3 generations of her family. You're overthinking it. Li Jinyan only replied calmly to his comrade's advice, I trust my intuition. To hell with your intuition. Xia Jinyuan cursed in his heart. Seeing that he was so insistent, he reminded him, recently, Yi Qian has been troubled by something. Since you have to investigate it, I hope you can postpone it for the time being. I don't want to complicate matters because of your investigation. Sure. Li Jinyan nodded. He would definitely be cautious when it came to Yi Qian, but he pursed his lips and asked, what's troubling Yi Qian? What happened to make you so nervous? No, it's not Yi Qian. As for the specific reason, I'm sorry, Devil, I can't tell you. I just hope you can delay your investigation. His intuition told him that Yi Qian had something to do with the Li family. He didn't know what to say. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. He wouldn't investigate anymore once he gave up. Li Jinyan, who still had to go to the military, didn't stay any longer. He opened the door and strode out. In the ward, Xia Jinyuan, who had been in a high-intensity battle for more than 10 days, raised his head and rubbed his slightly dizzy temples. Due to the severe lack of sleep, he thought for a while and carefully recalled his investigation of Yi Qian's family. After thinking for a while, he was certain that his little fox had nothing to do with the Li family. If the devil insists on investigating, then so be it. He had already reminded him not to cause trouble for the time being. With his character, he would do it. Xia Jinyuan stopped thinking about it and closed his eyes to rest. He needed to call Ho Zi later and ask what happened between Yi Jifan and the Du family. As for his little fox, he had to go to the southern province to look for her after he rested. He had a lot of things to deal with, so he had to rest well. Xia Jinyuan, who slept until 8 o'clock, opened his eyes. The first thing he did was to call Ho Zi in southern province. He needed to know what Yi Jifan and the Du family were up to. Only then did Xia Jinyuan realize that while he was away, Yi Qian had done quite a few big things. Ho Zi told Xia Jinyuan everything that had happened to Sun Yaozu without exaggerating. First, he shot Sun Yaozu's eyes with a glass shard. Then, he brought him to the mountain and dealt with him. I didn't do anything. Other than cleaning up the mess for her and getting rid of the foreign bodyguards that Sun Yaozu had illegally hired and framing him, the rest is the Southern Province Police's job. Xia Jinyuan did not react much when he explained everything that had happened in a few words. He was fine as long as his little fox was fine. She would not make a move easily. Once she made a move, she would definitely have to make a move. It was fine as long as she was fine. The second thing was the videotape. Xia Jinyuan was even more relieved. Although Little Fox did not directly tell Ho Zi how she was going to deal with the backup tapes, he could guess it based on his understanding of her. Yi Jifan would definitely receive one copy. One copy would most likely be sent to Madame Li because she wanted to cut off Yi Ying's escape route. The other copy would be from the military. His old man Xia. Both were possible. Chapter 21-24. The Deputy Chief of Staff Du had used his power for personal gain to send Ying into the military and even sent her to the Beijing Government Arts and Crafts Regiment. It seemed like the Deputy Chief of Staff Du was very confident in himself and believed that there would be no problems with what he did. Ying entering the military would not only make Yi Jifan's political career more difficult, but it would also be evidence for him to deal with the Deputy Chief of Staff Du in the future. If he wanted to blow up the matter and make Yi Jifan a target of the Du family, he would have to tell Little Fox to endure for a few more days until Ying entered the military and Mrs. Li saw the videotape. At most, she would have to endure for another 10 days. Your girlfriend is very good at taking care of herself. Lao Lu, you have good taste. Take good care of her and your future will be exciting and fulfilling. You can also rely on each other and won't make a scene because of your career. Ho Zi's mentality was becoming more and more peaceful. It was probably because he had experienced so much and lost so much that he realized that life was actually just two people relying on each other and slowly living the rest of their lives. Xia Jinyuan knew what kind of person he was talking to in the past. When he heard this, he raised his eyebrows and said, "You look like a loving father. How many months is my sister pregnant?" In front of Xia Yiwei, Ho Zi, who had restrained his anger, sighed. Why don't you believe that I've really changed? She's pregnant for a month. Ha ha ha, good news. I have to be a loving father. I'm already in my 40s and I have a child at an old age. If I don't learn to be a loving father, your sister will sharpen a kitchen knife in the middle of the night and warn me. Ho Zi had been in the underworld for more than 20 years and had been a mafia boss for more than 10 years. Even if he had washed his hands in a gold basin, the anger in his bones could not be washed away in such a short time. However, he was willing to give up for the person he loved and cultivate for the sake of the little life that was about to come. From his appearance, he was no longer as ruthless as he used to be. At least, when Yi Qian saw him, he almost thought that he had the indifference of sitting in the bamboo forest and looking at the clouds calmly. Xia Jinyuan, on the other hand, saw through Ho Zi and directly exposed him. When he found out that Xia Yiwei had been pregnant for a month, Xia Jinyuan was happy for the two of them. The two of them had an average age of 40, so it was time for them to have a child. After chatting with Xia Yiwei for a while, Xia Jinyuan hung up the phone with a smile on his handsome face. Good things always come in pairs. Xia Jinyuan put his phone back into his pocket with a faint smile and slowly lay back on the bed. He was in a good mood and there was a smile on his face. Sun Yaozu had already been dealt with, and Ho Zi Qingwei was keeping a close eye on him, so he didn't need to pay any attention to him. Now, all that was left was the videotape. Ho Zi gave him the videotape at the right time. Yi Jifan could only watch helplessly as Yi Ying ruined the opportunity that he had worked so hard to get. When the opportunity came, his little fox did not show any mercy and directly attacked. Moreover, it was a sure kill move. Want to enlist? Her character would only bring bad luck to the deputy chief of staff Du. After understanding the situation clearly, Xia Jinyuan began to plan his next step to cooperate with Yi Qian. She should have sent out the videotape by now, right? However, if she had sent it out, Yi Jifan should have received it by now. If he had received the videotape, would he still bring Yi Ying to the capital? It was a little unlikely. Madame Li, who did not tolerate anyone, was not an easy person to get along with. Last night, she even specially held a welcome dinner for Yi Jifan and his daughter. It was obvious that she really liked Yi Ying. However, if she found out that the girl that she thought was gentle and obedient was actually a debauchee, she would definitely make a big fuss. Chapter 21-25. This was interesting. Madame Li cared about her reputation the most. Yi Ying's move was undoubtedly a slap in her face, putting her in an awkward position. With Madame Li's vengeful personality, she would definitely fall out with Yi Jifan. Not only would they fall out, but Yi Jifan's family would also have a hard time. Then, would the person supporting Yi Jifan behind the scenes show up? Would they lend a helping hand? He really hoped that the person behind the scenes would help. As long as they showed up, the truth about Sun Xueqing would be revealed. He couldn't stay in the hospital. He had to go to Mr. Xiao's office. After that, he would go to Southern Province to see Little Fox, who he missed so much. She must have been very worried when they parted in such a hurry last time. Later, he didn't contact anyone outside. She must be very anxious. Now that he had returned to China, he naturally had to see her. After a few bottles of anti-inflammatory drips, Xia Jinyuan pulled out the needle himself. Then, he put on the military uniform and coat sent by V8 and strode out of the hospital while avoiding the eyes of the nurses. According to the doctor's advice, it was best for him to go to the hospital for 3 days to prevent the wound from being infected and suppurated again. For Xia Jinyuan, 3 days was too long. 3 hours was enough. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who got out of the car, was still far away when he saw a familiar figure standing by the flower bed. Even if the other party was wearing tattered clothes, he could still recognize the figure. At first glance, wasn't the person looking for him? You're so capable. Stay in the hospital for 3 days. You'll come out in 3 hours. Aren't you afraid that you'll faint on the way? When father and son met, they would start by insulting each other. Commander-in-Chief Xia frowned a little. He took off his military cap and put it on the desk. He stared at the boy who didn't listen to the doctor's advice and said coldly, "Why didn't you stay in the hospital? Why did you come here? Don't tell me you missed me and came here specially." He couldn't talk to his son, who gave him a headache. The only person who could deal with him was Xiao Yi. The penetrating wound on his waist was not treated properly, and the wound was infected and suppurated. As a soldier, he could understand that there were no better conditions to treat the wound during a mission. But now that he had returned to the country, the doctor had specially instructed him not to move around as he pleased and that he had to stay in the hospital for 3 days, but he still didn't listen. In the office, the difference between a superior and a subordinate, between a general and a major, Xia Jinyuan, who was standing in front of the desk, respectfully saluted the sitting commander-in-chief. All right, let's sit down and talk. After all, he was his son. Commander-in-Chief Xia was worried when he heard that his son was injured. He waved his hand and gestured for him to sit down first, lest he reopen the wound if he stood for too long. Long story short, you have a meeting to attend at 9:30. Xia Jinyuan, who had wanted to ask a few more questions, immediately explained the purpose of his visit. I wanted to ask if you received the videotape from Yi Qian. I've received a copy of the recording. As for the videotape. Wait a moment. Commander-in-Chief Xia saw that his son's expression was cold, so he took the intercom and asked the clerk, check if there are any mails from Southern Province. If there are, send them to me now. Mail and parcels that could be sent directly to Commander-in-Chief Xia were checked by specially designated personnel in order to prevent dangerous items from being carried. After waiting for about 5 minutes, the clerk came over with a package that was confirmed to be safe. It was the videotape that Yi Qian had sent to Commander-in-Chief Xia. Commander-in-Chief Xia didn't play it immediately. He directly asked, "What's in it?" Chapter 21-26. It's about the private life of a recruit before she joined the army. This recruit was diagnosed with a heart condition in junior high school, and it was recorded in her personal file. On the day of the college entrance examination, she framed Yi Qian for cheating to avenge her personal grudge. After an investigation by the Education Bureau, this recruit was banned from taking the college entrance examination for 5 years. In less than half a year, this recruit suddenly joined the army again, and it was very likely that she would enter the Beijing Government Arts and Crafts Regiment. The person who helped her to join the army was none other than Deputy Chief of Staff Du Xia Jinyuan, who was reporting seriously, glanced coldly at the videotape. His dark eyes flashed with a cold light. A recruit like this is not qualified to join the army. Deputy Chief of Staff Du not only allowed her to join the army without investigating the matter clearly, he even used special recruitment as an excuse to let her join the army in advance. Commander-in-Chief, if this person really joins the army, once her private life and past actions are reported by the media, our army's image will be seriously damaged. Commander-in-Chief Xia already knew who the recruit he was talking about was. Yi Qian sent a recording, and someone clearly mentioned the Deputy Chief of Staff Du. The military commission also heard this recording, but old Du was not an ordinary person. Without more conclusive evidence, no one, including himself, could easily touch old Du. This videotape also could not prove that there was something wrong with old Du. Special recruitment was not an exercise of privilege, and real people could indeed join the army in advance. Old Du only dared to do this because he knew about it. Yi Jifan's daughter joined the army because of her immoral character. If this matter was exposed, old Du would at most be criticized at the conference as not investigated. Rather than startling old Du now, it was better to hold back for the time being. Commander-in-Chief Xia looked at the videotape again. However, since his daughter-in-law sent the videotape to him, he could not ignore it. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had long regarded Yi Qian as his daughter-in-law, seemed to have thought of something and said something that seemed to have nothing to do with the topic. Xiao Yi didn't just send me the videotape, right? Who else did she send it to besides me? You have one box. One box was sent to Yi Jifan, and the other box was sent to the wife of the Deputy Chief of Staff Du. Xia Jinyuan did not want to hide what Yi Qian had done from his father. Since the old man asked about it, he must have some plans. Yi Jifan and his daughter arrived in Beijing yesterday. Mrs. Li personally welcomed them. Ho Zi also told me that Mrs. Li likes Ying very much. Xia Jinyuan paused for a few seconds to add on. Commander-in-Chief Xia looked at him thoughtfully for a moment and said, "This recruit hasn't joined the army yet, right? Let's talk about it after we enlist." Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows. Since the old man said so, it meant that the father and son had the same idea. He wanted Ying to enlist because he wanted to anger Mrs. Li so that she could settle the score with Ying and Yi Jifan for deceiving him. Mrs. Li was famous for her ruthlessness. Every military and political family in Beijing knew about it. Old man Xia knew that the videotape and Ying joining the army would not make the deputy chief of staff do anything, but he still let Ying join the army first. It was obvious that he had the same idea as him. He smiled and joked, "Yi Qian hasn't even married into our family, Xia, and you're already protecting her. I must tell her how much you care about her." Commander-in-Chief Xia did think so. Yi Zhifan was in politics. He could not reach out his hands, so he would let Mrs. Li, who liked to reach out, do it. After losing so much face, old Du's wife would not let the matter rest. Chapter 21-27. If I don't take good care of Xiao Yi, I'm really afraid that another guy with foresight will snatch him away from you. Commander-in-Chief Xia didn't spare any effort to attack his son. In exchange, Xia Jinyuan looked at him indifferently, so Commander-in-Chief Xia didn't mention it. Yi Qian trusted him, and he trusted Yi Qian. If he said too much, the two of them would laugh at him. Well, his son was much more reliable than before, so he shouldn't worry too much. As long as Major General Yang mentioned him, he would add, "Commander-in-Chief, it's all thanks to your hard work back then that Xia Jinyuan became what he is today." In fact, he only did it twice back then, and Major General Yang happened to meet him both times. As for what Xia Jinyuan is today, to be honest, it was all because of Xia Jinyuan's own hard work, and it had nothing to do with him. Now that he had found Yi Qian as his girlfriend, he probably didn't need to do anything in the future. The two of them could solve their own problems by themselves. But now that he could help, he would naturally help. As for old Du, you and Yi Qian are not allowed to interfere. Now, we should focus on investigating Yi Qian's mother, martyr Sun Xueqing. Commander-in-Chief Xia felt that the most important thing was not to bring down Yi Zhifan, but to investigate martyr Sun Xueqing. On the third day of the new year, the military commission asked Yi Qian to come to Beijing. The words military commission made Xia Jinyuan's eyes turn cold. Why did they ask her to come? One of martyr Sun Xueqing's comrades with the surname Kai, who is now the director of a city's public security bureau, is also investigating. He returned to his original unit to take some of the information from the investigation back then. Coincidentally, the military was also retrieving the original information, so they found this director. For the sake of caution, the military asked Yi Qian to come to the military commission to find out how much she knew about martyr Sun Xueqing. Yi Qian was very calm. Originally, the military commission wanted to test her, but she directly told Colonel Tan, who was talking to her, that she suspected there was a problem with martyr Sun Xueqing's sacrifice. She suddenly spoke so bluntly that Senior Colonel Tan, who was questioning her, almost lost his cool. Hearing this, Xia Jinyuan laughed. That's right, his little fox didn't like to beat around the bush, especially in front of the military commission, who was investigating martyr Sun Xueqing. The military disciplinary committee was not an ordinary place. Hiding it would be counterproductive. It was better to say it directly and let the head of the military disciplinary committee see her unreserved cooperation. When Commander-in-Chief Xia thought about what happened that day, a faint smile appeared on his serious face. But soon, he put away his smile and continued to be serious when facing Xia Jinyuan. The military takes Yi Jian's matter very seriously. Now, everything is on the right track. You should remind her not to act rashly so as not to ruin her future. Yi Zhifan's case has been investigated by the Discipline Inspection Commission. According to the current information, there are a few minor problems, but there are no major problems for the time being. Don't worry, it's only been 10 days. We don't expect to find a big problem immediately. Give the military commission some time. The military commission, and the military commission acted quickly. Little Fox didn't need to do anything. Once the videotape was sent out, they could sit back and watch the storm. Xia Jinyuan was very satisfied with the current situation. Commander-in-Chief Xia frowned when he saw the faint smile on his face. How can you still smile? Hurry up and go back to the hospital. Stay in the hospital for 3 days. Don't move around without my permission. It's a puncture wound, not a scratch. Don't mess around. Chapter 21-28. Sorry to disappoint you. I've never thought of going back since I was discharged from the hospital. Major Xia, who had finished his business, got up lazily. His thin lips curled into a slightly roguish smile. Faced with Commander-in-Chief's military might, he said calmly, I plan to go to the airport and head to the southern province now. I have to see your daughter-in-law first. Otherwise, I'm really afraid that the daughter-in-law I finally got will be taken away by another man. Why would he go to the southern province with an injury? Even if he wanted to court a daughter-in-law, he had to be healthy. Commander-in-Chief Xia's face completely darkened. Nonsense. Wait until your injury is healed. As he spoke, he took out an encrypted document from the drawer. Take a look at this document. I want to see this document. I also want to go to the southern province. I'm not fooling around with you. When Xia Jinyuan decided on something, especially when it came to Yi Qian, he would not change his mind at all. He calmly accepted Commander-in-Chief Xia's extremely intimidating gaze and unhurriedly opened the document. When he read it, he was immediately amused. I'm not in a hurry. Why is the military in a hurry? This was a document regarding the conferment of military ranks. The document stated, in view of the fact that Major Xia Jinyuan has not responded to the conferment of the rank of Lieutenant Colonel for a long time, we specially request the military to directly overtake Major Xia Jinyuan and confer the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. Commander-in-Chief Xia had never interfered with his son's promotion, but now that the document was in his hands, he had to ask. You should have been conferred the rank of Lieutenant Colonel last July. Why did you delay the conferment? Do you want to learn from the founding generals? You don't want to be conferred the rank. You're mocking me again. Xia Jinyuan took the document. His gaze fell on the bright red military emblem on the cover of the document. His slender fingers gently stroked it. It's not that I don't want to, but I want to slow down a little and wait for Yi Qian to come up. He wanted to wait for Yi Qian to graduate and for her to be conferred the same rank as him. Hearing this, Commander-in-Chief Xia's unfathomable eyes moved a little. His son cherished Yi Qian more than he had imagined, and also knew how to cherish Yi Qian more than he had imagined. Good lad, tough enough. As expected of the offspring of his old family Xia. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was very satisfied, showed anger on his face. You don't want the rank just because I said so. Do you think it's child's play? From last July to this year, do you still want to drag it out? I'm not dragging. I'm just slowing down. Xia Jinyuan obviously knew that his father was bluffing, but he really had to explain this matter to his father. If nothing goes wrong, Yi Qian will graduate with an Outstanding Student Award and be promoted to captain. And since she started in junior high school, she has repeatedly made military contributions to the army. When she graduates, she can be conferred the rank of major. I'm not in a hurry to wait another 4 years. I'll wait until she graduates. Commander-in-Chief Xia chose not to listen to his explanation. Then it's not up to you to drag it out. The military rank has already been issued, so you have to think about it even if you don't want to. I'll get the guards to send you back to the hospital. Behave yourself. The military rank had to be conferred. How could it be delayed? If he didn't listen, someone else would take care of him. When Commander-in-Chief Xia thought of someone, he was referring to Yi Qian. Xia Jinyuan, who didn't want to confront him, took a step back for the time being. He didn't mention going to Southern Province in the afternoon. Instead, he said that he had something to discuss with Major General Yang and that he would go to the hospital after the matter was settled. Without waiting for the guards to come over, he left under Commander-in-Chief Xiao's cold gaze. He really did need to look for Major General Yang of the army. He had to ask which comrades of the Snowfield Brigade had gone abroad to participate in the competition. After he walked out of the office, Commander-in-Chief Xiao called Major General Yang of the army and instructed him to get the guards to escort Xia Jinyuan back to the hospital after the matter was settled. Then, he called Yi Qian and asked her to come forward and persuade the troublesome bastard to stay. Chapter 21-29. Xia Jinyuan hadn't contacted Yi Qian yet, so Commander-in-Chief Xia instructed his staff to call the office of the Director of the University of Science and Technology of China and make an appointment first. The University of Science and Technology of China had strict regulations and didn't allow students to use cell phones. At this time, not many students had cell phones. Even if they did, they had to hand over their cell phones as soon as they arrived at school and wait until they were out, on holidays, or on official business. Yi Qian, who had reported yesterday, handed over his cell phone as soon as possible. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who knew the rules, didn't call his cell phone directly. Instead, he called the director's office. He didn't make the call himself either. He asked his staff to make the call first and then transfer the call to his office. The military called to look for a student. It was none other than Yi Qian, who most of the teachers in the school knew. The director, who knew Yi Qian, looked at the class schedule and asked the teacher to inform Yi Qian after class. Yi Qian was sitting in library number 3 and discussing with several top students from other classes. On the first day of school, the students hadn't gotten over the New Year's atmosphere yet. The freshmen were given a mission. On Labor Day, the freshmen were to go to the northern part of the province for a drill. As the frontline leaders of the future battles, they were instructed to experience the atmosphere of a battle where life and death were on the line. As soon as the order was given, the red and blue teams of each class began to prepare in advance. After the first class, the red and blue teams sent out representatives of each class in less than 2 minutes. They met during the short break between classes at the speed of light. There's no preparation time for a real battle. A battle that starts as soon as it's announced is the real battle that determines the outcome. A top student from the School of Science spread out a map of the training base they were going to on Labor Day. The school suddenly told us that there's a drill on Labor Day. Why do I feel like the map they gave us isn't a real one? 2 armies are fighting for positions. Who would have the chance to run to the position and observe the terrain first? Who would know in advance that the position they took would be the position that the Blue Army would be fighting for? I asked the seniors in the School of Science and went through some information myself. I found that the school really didn't tell us the positions we would be practicing a few months in advance. At most, they gave us an approximate time. When it's our turn, you're telling us the time, location, and number of people. You're even giving us time to arrange our troops in advance. Don't you find it a little strange? The students of the School of Science were all engineering students, so their logical thinking was quite rigorous. They had a thick book on cryptography, while Yi Qian and the others had only just started studying it, but they had already finished self-studying. Another student said, having a direction is better than not having one. Let's not talk about whether it's strange or not. We can first familiarize ourselves with the northern training base and the surrounding terrain. When the time comes, we can carry out the drill anywhere. We can't always focus on the north. Our school has exercise bases in the east, west, south, and north. In my opinion, we can't just grasp the north. We have to grasp the exercise bases in the east, west, south, and north. Only in this way, no matter where the exercise is, we won't have to improvise. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, make a plan before you act. Know when to stop and you will gain. I agree with this student's point of view. Some students agreed. Only by not fighting an unprepared war can one be invincible. This had been the case in all wars since ancient times. Yi Qian didn't speak immediately. Although she had actual combat experience and had participated in a real battle between two armies, she had never participated in a drill involving hundreds of people. Regarding this, she decided to listen first and then express her opinion. Chapter 21:30. The short meeting was just to get to know each other. There was only so much time outside of class. They met to get to know each other and set a time for the next meeting before returning to their respective classrooms. At noon, Yi Qian finished her lunch and told Su Wen and He Qing that she needed to go to the dean's office. She told them to go back to their dorms to rest while she jogged to the dean's office. Su Wen looked at Yi Qian's back as she left and lamented to He Qing, I have two fears. One is my father, and the other is entering the office. Every time I see a classmate entering the office, I always feel like the wind is blowing and the water is freezing. The hero will never return. As long as you improve your physical fitness, you will never have the chance to go to the office. He Jing pointed out her classmate's weakness without giving her any face. During the scolding session this morning, as long as your physical fitness was mentioned, I saw our instructor's gaze sweep over you. Why are you so weak? You're second from the bottom in the class. You're quite capable. You eat so much every day. If you don't gain strength, you'll only gain weight. What's the use of gaining weight? It's not like you can be slaughtered to buy meat. Su Wen was horrified. I gained weight again. No way. I just went back for the new year and I gained weight again. My father dug me out of bed at 5 in the morning to run. How can I gain weight? Facing the classmate who completely missed the point, He Jing patted her shoulder and sighed with emotion. The wind is bleak and the water is cold. Once a hero leaves, he will never return. Classmate, take care. In the previous semester's physical fitness exam, Su Wen, who had been lagging behind since the start of the freshman's military training, received the lowest score in history. Her instructor and captain were shocked. It could be predicted that Su Wen's life would be tragic this semester. Your grades in the military academy could not be too good, but your physical fitness had to be very, very good. Otherwise, you would only have more miserable days ahead of you. As someone who had not attended classes for a month, Yi Qian naturally did not feel any pressure when she became the top student in the entire school. Last night, the instructor even talked to her and asked if she could spare some time to help the students who were in the bottom 20 in class improve their physical fitness. He also said that there was no need to worry about being too ruthless. They could only blame themselves for being too weak. Yi Qian said she would do her best. Yi Qian, who was running towards the director's office, thought that it was because of this matter. She knocked on the door and shouted, reporting in. When she heard a "Please come in" from inside, the first thing Yi Qian did when he pushed the door open was to give a military salute. Commander-in-Chief, Yi Qian is here. Please wait a moment, I'll pass the phone to her. The hospital director was on the phone. His words made Yi Qian realize who was looking for him. Yi Qian, who had spoken with Commander-in-Chief Xia many times, was not as tense as before. However, when Yi Qian heard Commander-in-Chief Xia's dignified voice, he could not help but straighten his back. Xiao Yi, sixth brother, has already returned to the country. He even suffered some minor injuries. I stopped him from coming to the southern province to look for you. I hope you can forgive him. Knowing that Xia Jinyuan had returned safely, Yi Qian, who had been heavily shackled, felt the shackles on her heart suddenly loosen. The sound of flowers blooming in spring bloomed from the depths of her heart. However, at the same time, her brows were tightly knitted together. She knew that Commander-in-Chief Xia's minor injuries were not really minor injuries. If they were, Commander-in-Chief Xia would not have specially called her. Chapter 2131. His injuries must be so serious that he had to be hospitalized. Yi Qian, who was a little out of breath, closed his eyes slightly and tried to mentally prepare himself before asking calmly, "Can you tell me how serious his condition is?" He was very calm, but every word was so heavy that it felt like a stone had fallen from the sky and hit Chief Commander Xia. He suddenly realized that he had made such a call. Was it a little inappropriate? Even though Commander-in-Chief Xia was a dignified general, he was also a father who deeply cared about his son. Before he could reflect on his inappropriate call, Commander-in-Chief Xia quickly smiled and replied, "It's okay, it's okay." His waist was pierced, but it avoided the vital parts. He handled it a little carelessly, and the shrapnel left 2 small fragments, which caused the wound to become inflamed. He handled it immediately after returning to China. The doctor suggested that he stay in the hospital for 3 days and get an anti-inflammatory drip. He just came over and told me that he wanted to visit you in the afternoon, but I didn't agree. The clerk who knocked on the door walked in quietly and saw that the Commander-in-Chief was on the phone with someone. He opened the camouflage folder and presented the contents to the Commander-in-Chief. This was an invitation from the Political Department's Arts and Crafts Department. Commander-in-Chief Xia was invited to watch the Beijing government troops' upcoming performance in the army. The general idea was to invite leaders of all levels, and then the leaders of all levels would give instructions, guidance, and criticism. Commander-in-Chief Xia's gaze fell on one of the invited work units, pointed here, and said, "Go and ask the school leaders who will be coming to Beijing to watch." "Okay." The clerk nodded, put down the folder, and left the office. On the other end of the phone, Yi Qian secretly let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, I will definitely stop him from coming over. I will definitely keep him in the hospital for 3 days. For his health, she would definitely not let him come over to Nan province." His waist was pierced by shrapnel and avoided the vital parts. Although the injury was serious, it was better than a bullet pierced through the waist. With Yi Qian's help, Commander-in-Chief Xia was relieved. However, he could understand his son's feelings of wanting to see his girlfriend. It was quite pitiful for the 2 of them to be apart so much. Thinking of the document just now, Commander-in-Chief Xia asked about Yi Qian's grades last semester and whether anything had happened in the past few days. Yi Qian, who had good grades, reported his grades one by one. "My overall grades are okay. There's not much to do in the next few days. The main classes haven't started yet, so I'll focus on physical fitness for the time being." Focus on physical fitness for the time being. That's easy. With an idea in mind, Commander-in-Chief Xia praised Yi Qian first. He smiled and said, "Not bad, not bad. No wonder old Six told me confidently that you would definitely get the title of outstanding student. Little Yi, you're very good. You let us all be at ease. Since you don't have classes these few days, and it's Saturday and Sunday in 3 days, how about this? You go to the capital with the school leaders to watch the performance of the Beijing political group. At the same time, you go to the hospital to visit Six's brother, lest he sneaks into the southern province to look for someone and make everyone uneasy." Yi Qian readily agreed. It should be said that he couldn't ask for more. She really, really wanted to see Captain Xia. She really, really missed him. Lovesickness seeped into her bones, and she was deeply sentimental. Regarding the matter of Yi Qian coming to Beijing with the school leaders had called the dean before she left the dean's office. They asked the dean to inform Yi Qian that he would come to Beijing with the school leaders at 9:00 tomorrow to report on his work. They couldn't directly go to Beijing to watch the performance. After all, watching the performance was secondary. The meeting after the performance was the main point. Chapter 2132. Yi Qian, who was about to leave for the capital, was oblivious to the fact that Yi Ying was talking about her. Browsing through the graduation album of the military academy, she chuckled and said, "Gee, I always thought that you graduated from the National University of Science and Technology as well. So, it turns out that you graduated from this military academy." Du Jie, who was in the midst of putting on her eye makeup, replied with a lukewarm in response to Yi Ying's enthusiasm. She then asked, "What do you mean by also? Do you have a friend who graduated from the National University of Science and Technology?" "I don't think so." "Aren't you still in school at your age?" "I don't know anyone who graduated, but I do know someone who is still in school. We aren't friends, so our relationship is just a so-so. That girl used to be in the same junior high school as me, and her results were average. However, after the college entrance examinations, she somehow managed to get into the National University of Science and Technology." "It was a huge deal back then," Yi Ying said calmly. At the same time, there was a hint of jealousy and disdain in her voice. It was difficult for two girls to like an outstanding girl, but it was easy for them to hate the same girl. It just so happened that Du Jie was secretly looking for Yi Ying's faults. Hearing her words, a cold sneer crept onto her lips. Feigning concern, she said, "Having such an outstanding girl by your side is indeed a headache. All right, you aren't bad yourself, so why are you being jealous of her?" "It's not that I'm jealous of her. It's just that she used to be really bad. Her results back then were really bad. She was always at the bottom of her class from primary school to junior high school. I found it hard to believe that she managed to get into the military academy all of a sudden." Yi Ying continued flipping through the album as she casually continued speaking. "Take Sis Jie for example. Your results have always been good, so it's no surprise that you managed to get into the military academy. On the other hand, from primary school to junior high school, she had to copy my homework every single time. No one gave her any exams, so she was always at the bottom of her class. How can I not be surprised that she managed to get into the military academy during the college entrance examinations? That's indeed a little surprising. So that's what happened. Someone who was worse than me suddenly managed to get into the military academy. Naturally, I would feel a little disappointed, so Du Jie said apologetically. Yi Ying continued as if she did not understand, "I'm her relative. We share the same surname and grew up together. I'm happy that she got into the military academy, but I'm also worried. It's fine if he really relied on himself to pass the exam, but I'm afraid that's not the case." At that time, everyone in the village was happy, but my parents were worried, afraid that they would be happy for nothing. If Du Jie conveyed her words to the deputy chief of staff Du He, "Yi Qian, oh Yi Qian, what do you think will happen to you?" Du Jie, who was not interested, suddenly opened her eyes. She turned to look at Yi Ying, who was sitting on the dressing table to her left. "She has the same surname as you. What's his name?" "Yi Qian." Yi Ying could tell that there was something amiss with her tone, so she thought that Zhang Xian had understood what she was trying to say. With a deep frown, she sighed deeply. "My cousin grew up without parents. If not for my parents raising her, she would have been living on the streets by now. She wasn't the type to study since young. My parents said that it was my uncle and auntie who blessed her that she was able to get into the military academy. They had the same surname, but one was from the military academy while the other was from the army. Am I overthinking things? Do you have a picture of her?" Let me take a look. Regardless of whether I'm overthinking things or not, I'll know once I see the picture. Du Jie asked, unwilling to give up. Chapter 2133. Du Jie was far more scheming than Yi Qian, and she was better at hiding things. She didn't want others to know that she knew Yi Qian, and she also didn't want others to see her abnormality. She added lightly, if a gentle and generous girl like you doesn't like Yi Qian, I'm sure that Yi Qian isn't very likable. Ying hoped that Du Jie would stand on her side. Hearing this, she smiled and said, I don't hate her, but I don't like her either. After all, she and I are still family. I also hope that she doesn't do anything wrong and doesn't always think of taking shortcuts. Hearing this, Du Jie almost couldn't help but laugh out loud. What right did she have to criticize others? Wasn't she the same? The two sisters were the same. If the Yi Qian she was talking about was the same person as the Yi Qian she knew, then it really was. Du Jie's eyes darkened as she played with the eyebrow pencil. If it really was the same person, she had to admit that Yi Qian was undoubtedly much better than Yi Ying. However, they had one thing in common, and that was that she didn't like either of them. She was from a small family, yet she wanted to marry into a big family. She was dreaming. As for the other one, she always tried to be brave, but all the male soldiers fell for her tricks. Did she think that she was a flower in the army and wanted to stand out and make all the female soldiers feel inferior? Du Jie's mind flashed with the image of a face that was as beautiful as the moon, even if she was dirty. Her eyes flashed with a ruthless look, and her mood instantly sank. Paw! She threw the eyebrow pencil in her hand onto the dressing table. I'm sorry, Miss Du. The makeup artist thought that she had applied too much eye makeup and made Du Jie uncomfortable. She was so frightened that she quickly apologized. Du Jie had a habit of venting her anger on others, but she never did it in front of others. Instead, she liked to play dirty tricks behind people's backs. This matter had nothing to do with the makeup artist, so she didn't need to vent her anger on a mere makeup artist. She raised her hand, indicating that it had nothing to do with her. However, Ying misunderstood. She thought that Du Jie was standing up for her and said softly, Jie, don't be angry. I don't care anymore. I don't have the photos. If you want to see them, I'll see if I can get the photos taken during graduation. Who would look at the graduation photo? It was filled with heads, how could they see it clearly? Can you show me a solo photo? Du Jie glanced at Ying, who was putting on an act in front of her, and the disgust in her heart grew stronger. She really didn't understand what her mother liked about her. Pretentious and pretentious. Although her looks were acceptable, this kind of appearance was completely unrecognizable. Seeing the flash of joy in Yi Ying's eyes, Du Jie immediately understood why Yi Ying had mentioned Yi Qian to her. Earlier, she had mentioned that Yi Qian's grades were not good, but he had suddenly gotten into the military academy. Wasn't this hinting that Yi Qian had relied on cheating to get into the college entrance exams? Now she understood. So this was her true intention. Since you said that her grades might be fake, then we have to check it out. The military academy is meant to groom future military officers. How can there be fish eyes as pearls? Give me the solo photo as soon as possible. I'll ask my father to find out what's going on. Yi Ying was so agitated that she secretly pinched her thigh to suppress her excitement. However, she pinched herself too hard. Her expression of pain and excitement intertwined, causing her sweet features to twist. She panicked and said, there's no need to check, there's no need to check. She's doing very well now. I heard that if she didn't pass the military academy's new training program, she would be rejected. Since she didn't, it means that she's still capable. Chapter 2134. The door of the dressing room was pushed open and Madame Li, who was dressed in a dignified and noble manner, walked in. Yi Ying, who was talking, turned her head when she heard the noise. She hurriedly adjusted her expression and stood up. She stood up gracefully and greeted Madame Li. Madame. Madame Li took in all her expressions. She didn't know what was going on and thought that her daughter had embarrassed Yi Ying again. Seeing that Yi Ying could quickly adjust her expression and pretend to be calm, she smiled with satisfaction. She didn't misjudge her. She was indeed a sensible girl who knew not to embarrass others. You are injured. Don't be so polite. Sit down. Mrs. Li, who walked over elegantly, took the initiative to put her arm around Yi Ying's shoulder. She thought for a while and said, "Fortunately, your face is not injured. Don't wear anything else later. Just wear a military uniform. Don't put too much makeup on your face. Just be simple and elegant." Du Jie, who had finished the eye makeup, said with a smile, "Mom, in fact, I don't need to put on too much makeup. Just be simple and elegant. Just wear a military uniform." You want to disagree with me again, don't you? Mrs. Li tapped her daughter's forehead with her index finger. She was in a good mood and joked with the makeup artist. Make her uglier. She will be too ashamed to see others later. The makeup artist hurriedly said respectfully, "Miss Du is born beautiful. She is very beautiful without makeup." Did you hear that, Mom? You have to listen to the opinions of the people and the voices of the people. Du Jie, who was smiling like a flower, raised her eyebrows like a girl and pulled Yi Ying into the topic. Tell me, who is prettier, me or Yi Ying? Mrs. Li liked Du Jie's coquettishness very much. It was not coquettish, but coquettishness that made her laugh. Hearing this, Mrs. Li looked at her and then at Yi Ying. Each has her own merits. However, Yi Ying is more well-behaved. Look at her. She's well-behaved. Du Jie smiled and looked at Yi Ying, who had lowered her head and blushed. She laughed even more clearly. Don't talk about it. She is blushing. She didn't know whether she was blushing because of anger or because she was really embarrassed. Du Jie retracted her gaze coldly and began to discuss with Madame Li which necklace would suit the gown better. More than a dozen necklace boxes were opened and placed neatly on the dressing table. Every necklace was expensive, and one of them was the pink diamond necklace. Yi Ying. Beautiful, resplendent, envious. How about a pink one? It looks good in pink and matches your white lace gown perfectly. Madame Li personally put on the pink diamond for her daughter. As she lowered her head, she smiled gently and said, "Your sweetheart will also be here tonight. Dress up well and let him be stunned by you." You said Qin Xiu would come. Look at you. You are already stunned before he comes. Mrs. Li tidied her daughter's hair and instructed the makeup artist elegantly, "It doesn't have to be too thick. Just plain and light will do. She doesn't have to be too mature. She is still young." "Yes, madam." The makeup artist answered in fear, for fear that she would make Mrs. Li angry. Mrs. Li nodded with satisfaction and turned to Yi Ying. "Yi Ying, go and change into the military uniform. I will take you out for a walk. There are guests at home. Li Yuan is entertaining the male guests. Help me talk to the female guests. They are all girls in their 20s. I can't keep up with their topics." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.